You guys ready? Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. I'll call the February 12th Select Board meeting to order. Before we begin our regular agenda, I'd like to recognize two members of our community that we lost this week. Bud Glidden, who was an emergency management volunteer director and very, very, very helpful to the town, and Dual McIntyre, who was the president of the Civic League and served on various town work groups. So if we could have a moment of silence. Thank you all. I don't believe that there's any changes to the agenda, so we'll accept that and move on to announcements.
This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The NRTA has a brief announcement. Seniors ride the wave free every Wednesday in February. Thank you, Paula. Town offices will be closed this coming Monday, February 17th, in observance of President's Day. And I think that's it.
This is the public comment portion of our agenda for something that's otherwise not on our agenda for discussion. Is there anyone here for that tonight? Yes.
Are we on us or NRTA?
We'll get to NRTA.
All right.
Good evening.
Richard Brannigan, and I'd like to discuss and ask a question regarding the professional service agreement that I was happy to see that was awarded on January 22nd in the amount of $137,000 for the design services of the Nobadir Playing Fields Fieldhouse project that probably everyone knows has been out there percolating for about 10 years or so. This appropriation, as evidenced on the source of funding, came out of a $700,000 capital expenditure in 2016. So my question is twofold. When is the building construction going to start? Number two is, do we have a budget for this structure? And number three is, if we had $700,000 and we're using $137,000 for design and engineering, I would assume after this period of time, the budget for the structure is going to be greater than $700,000. And if that is the case, where is the incremental money going to come from when the contract is awarded, which would indicate when the structure is going to start? Thank you.
Okay, we'll get you answers to those.
Okay.
Okay.
It would be really helpful if those could be put in writing to our office.
Okay, can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else? Okay, there's no new business that I'm aware of. We'll move on to approval of minutes from September 18th.
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the payroll and treasury warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And pending contracts. We have the same on this week that had some questions last week. Do we want to separate them?
Yeah, let's do the plus ones first.
Okay. Were there any more questions? I know Andrew came in case that there were questions about.
For the,
The
yeah,
design.
mine on the roundabouts, I'm just wondering, are we still large roundabouts, or are we considering, mini roundabouts?
I guess we've got a little semantic thing going on here. So
Right.
we have always considered except for the main rotary. The main rotary is going to be a large roundabout. Of the similar scale of Sparks Avenue, that I guess would be it's miniature in terms of what you find everywhere else, but I think it's an appropriate scale.
How wide, are they going to have, can you drive right over the middle, or is there going to be a grass median in the middle?
Well, that decision, I will tell you that from the staff perspective, we're not going to recommend any roundabout that you can drive over on most of the roads where they're proposed.
Right.
The volume of the traffic and the safety just isn't there. Right. So, I mean, we have one mini roundabout with a mountable surface, which is in the Rugged Scott development. And, the drivers here, I picture some of these roundabouts with no barriers that you just would drive through the middle, over the center. It's not going to be safe. So you all get to pick the final design if you want to proceed with those. We wouldn't recommend them.
Right. Yeah, I would like to make sure. I don't want to agree to something and then come back later and say, well, this is what we're doing because you've already agreed to it. I want to make sure that we're doing something that's in keeping with the the look of the island and the scale. And I think the voters have spoken pretty clearly against roundabouts in a couple of these locations. And I think, we may be able to, get support for sort of smaller versions that are more in keeping with the island. But I think we have to be careful about being too suburban. That's why I'm concerned about it.
Right.
And I think we need to.
At some point, I think if, to spend money and build something that is not a good outcome and is compromised,
Right.
then you might as well stick to what you have.
Right. And that's.
Yeah, I think trying to find the balance between safety, getting the large trucks through, and then kind of balance the aesthetics and.
Right. Well, that's why I was asking about, can they drive over the middle? Cars aren't going to drive over the middle if it's a Belgian block, but a big truck taking a left turn, because I know that's the truck lane, a big truck taking a left turn will. And that's how they're designed when you look at the pictures of them. But
Rob?
Just wanted to comment. While I know some folks have said the mini roundabout is more in keeping with what historic character may be, you may find that professional engineers will not stamp what they deem an unsafe. They wouldn't push a design forward that they would deem unsafe. So I think that's where the conflict lies. I know that they've looked at various configurations, and the recommendations that they're putting forward is something that they would be able to stamp professionally.
But we'll continue to have some input. Okay. All right. Christie made a motion. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
All those in favor?
no.
Opposed? Motion carries 3-1.
Is that's for both of them? Okay, both. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted on the record that we have more work to do if we're going to get consensus and buy-in for this.
Next contract.
At your meeting last week, you had some questions that we didn't have the information for entirely, so I wanted to give you that information and then bring a couple of other things to your attention. One of the questions was, what would be the cost to transport this sand to somewhere else? And the market rate, I'm told, to transport is approximately $5 per yard at 9,500 yards. or so. That would be approximately $45,000. That's just the market price. The town would have to bid that out, and so who knows what that price would end up being. Could be more, maybe less, but most likely more. It would also have to be screened. There are some different variables with regard to screening, so I really wasn't able to get an actual cost for that. It depends on what's in it, how much it has to be screened, maybe where it would be going, that sort of thing. So that would just add to the cost. We tried to locate some other available locations. We looked at Tom Nevers. That's really not suitable for public safety and security reasons. We looked at the Surfside Sewer Treatment Plant. There's simply no room out there due to other activities going on, similar to the Sconset Treatment Facility. We looked at somewhere on this site, but again, there's a lot that's going to be going on here. And we also looked at Public Works, and Rob could speak to this. I guess maybe people think there's more room out there than there really is, but a small amount could go there, but not 9,500 cubic yards. We also did come up with something, but it is going to have an impact on something else, which is the lot, maybe Eric, if you can pull it up, the lot where the sand is now is scheduled, as we know, for the Marine Department layup building. We could potentially leave the sand there and use the lot next door, which is owned by the town, for the Marine Department layup building. The impact would be that that parcel is sort of identified and authorized by town meeting to be leased for, the idea was sort of divide it up and lease it for contractor activities. We were going to divide it up into smaller parcels and perhaps have some kind of a management contract that would be bid out, and contractors could potentially go out there. We do get inquiries about that every now and then, so that would have to be put off, but that would be a fairly easy scenario. We would have to clear the contractor lot, which is not cleared right now, for the Marine Department building, where the sand currently is. Obviously, the sand would go and the lot would already be cleared, but that is a possibility. As the board may know, I think I've tried to make this clear, we do not have any shovel-ready projects right now for that sand. It certainly doesn't mean we shouldn't retain it, but we didn't have anything ready. Getting something ready is going to take some amount of permitting time, probably multiple years. The DEP permit, as I think has been brought to our attention a couple of times now, does have some conditions, specifically, and some commentary in it. It indicates that about 80% of the sand, at least initially when we were first talking about what to do with the spoils, about 80% of the sand was going to be sold anyway. That was kind of the plan back in 2016 or a little bit earlier. I don't need to necessarily go through every bit of this, but the requirements about the sand would be that the buyer has to prove that they have an existing permit that's valid for beach nourishment at their property, which the high bidder does. They need to have applicable public beach access easements that have been secured for the public use of the private land, which I believe they do, and they obviously have to pay for it. So those are just some things to keep in mind. The purchase price, purchase dollars, can't just go into the general fund. They have to be segregated out and used for specific projects that are related to erosion control measures or beach nourishment and or dredging, things related to that. And it would definitely help offset some things that we need to get furthered, including the dredge management plan and the sediment transport plan that we've been talking about. We don't have enough funds currently to fund at least the sediment transport plan. I'm not even sure if we have funds to finish the dredge management plan, but that would help with that. But I mean, obviously, we certainly understand the public and even the boards and the administration's desire to keep the sand. And again, we could, but it will have an impact here. And we felt that there were other issues that would be more readily taken care of if the sand were sold. But it's obviously up to the board's final say.
Okay, so, I mean, the basic policy decision is whether we want to cancel the bid and retain the sand, or whether we want to approve the contract. I think that there are some interested members of the public. I'll take limited public comment.
Good evening, Dave Franzuto. I swore I'd never come back here and make things more difficult, but I've been contacted by several people about this because of our involvement with obtaining the permits. And I think that the thing you have to foremost remember is the fundamental point of this whole sand selling exercise is the public trust doctrine. And the public trust doctrine goes back centuries in Massachusetts. And the government, you folks, have the holds the rights to the submerged lands under navigable waters in trust for the public. So the permit was not only for the dredging of the approximately 9,000 cubic yards of sand from Pulpus Harbor entrance channel, but it was also to establish the sandbank, which was I thought was a pretty good idea at the time because the abutters didn't want this sand, and as we all know, it's becoming a commodity. So I came up with a novel idea to sell it because it belongs to all of us. So the permit from the Concom and the Mass DEP and the United States Corps of Engineers, and Libby said a lot of what I'm going to say, and I apologize, allows for not only the dredging of the sand, but also to establish the sandbank. And I was going to ask Erica to put the permit up for page 3, which established the sandbank, but Libby went over most of it.
And identified the areas you could store it, right?
Right. We permitted 2 areas, one out at the DPW and this place on Shadbush Road. So there's the proposed sandbank section there on page 3. And this permit states in numerous cases that the sand can only be used for beach nourishment and erosion control projects. If the sand is sold to the buyer, they must have, and Libby went over this, proof of valid permit. But the most important thing in what she said was public use and beach access, again, back to the public trust doctrine for public benefit. The sand can't be used to make concrete, to pour foundations, and you can't use it for sand in the roads. It's for beach nourishment and erosion control projects for the town. And we started a few erosion control projects that were born out of the coastal management plan, and we had to use sand that the town we already owned that was compatible, and we used that. But and the proceeds need to go into the general fund to fund future projects, which again, I felt when we were writing the permit, I felt that this was the right thing to do because funding is so difficult to come by. So this should be in perpetuity. You sell the sand and you fund another dredge project, or you fund some more permits, and you keep doing this. It's not a one-time deal. The dredge plan was developed to be able to obtain a comprehensive consolidated permitting process for the future. For the 30 years that I obtained permits for the town to do dredging, we did it piecemeal. We did one project at a time. And I used this analogy the other day at the coastal or this example the other day at the Coastal Resiliency meeting. When we dredged Pulpus Harbor Entrance Channel in 1993, the permits took us 4 months and about $30,000 or $40,000. The last time we got the permits, it took us 2.5 years and about $140,000. So we can't keep doing that because the need is continuous. It's going to always be there. And I'm glad that we are working on the dredge plan. We did get approval at town meeting to come up with an island-wide comprehensive dredge plan. I know that it was supposed to be done in July, and I don't know where we are with that. But that's the document that will feed this in perpetuity, because what you end up with is a consolidated permit, and you don't have to do it piecemeal. You don't have to do it project by project. You'll have an island-wide consolidated permit. So beach nourishment, major topic at the Coastal Resiliency meeting the other day. There are several projects. If you talk to Jeff Carlson, there are several projects island-wide that people came to us when we first came up with this idea of what we were going to do with the sand. It came to us and said that have a annual requirement for beach replenishment. I know we all talk about SBPF because that's, a large project and it's a lot of sand, but there are several projects island-wide that need this sand, need clean sand like this. What I just said was, with the Coastal Resiliency Plan, there will be no shortage of uses for this sand in the future. This first sale of the sand, although it's had some fits and starts here, if you read the permit, initially what we were trying to do was we were trying to get the contractor to take. So we were trying to sell the sand so we didn't have to double handle it, which is now what we're doing. If you read the permit, we had provisions in there where the contractor would take it directly from the dredge site and take it and buy it and then use it. That was our initial hope. It didn't work out that way, but we ended up having to store it, which again is why we had the sites permitted to hold it. Sale of the sand is a good thing as long as it's used for the right reasons. Town erosion projects, beach nourishment, private and public. This funding source will reduce the overall cost to the taxpayer for years to come. Okay, you see that we're going to generate here, I don't know, what's this contract worth? 240, what?
240.
All right, so 240. There's 240 that we didn't have a minute ago. But that was only 9,000 cubic yards, okay? The second time we dredged Pulpus Harbor in 1993, it was 30,000 cubic yards. It was almost 40,000 cubic yards, excuse me. When we dredged Nantucket, Entrance Channel, and Hither Creek in 1985, it was over 40,000 cubic yards. So take this dollar amount, inflate it because it's a commodity and it's going to be worth more, and multiply that by 40,000. So now you can see where this should, be a benefit to the town in the future. So again, use the sand for what it is for. Town erosion projects, beach erosion, beach nourishment, and I think this permit and this process will serve you well.
Thank you.
Deanne Atherton, the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, we thank you for holding this over to this week so we could have a public discussion. As you know, we tried to prepare some very concise comments and submitted some slides to accompany our comments, and our slides were not approved to be projected. So we have made hard copies of our slides and passed them out. It seems like an odd handout, and it is. And it's to take the place of our being unable to project them up on the screen. This is our case. Why it is not in the best interest of the town to proceed with the proposed sale of 9,500 cubic yards of sand currently stockpiled on town property located on Shadbush Row. The town has a comprehensive plan for the use of such sand for municipal purposes, not private purposes, public purposes. And that plan is called the Coastal Management Plan. The Board of Selectmen formally adopted the Coastal Management Plan in 2014. The Coastal Management Plan focuses only on town-owned properties. The Coastal Management Plan Work Group conducted 36 public meetings, including 6 public hearings over the course of 2 years, from March 2012 to March 2014, to produce the plan. The work group was co-chaired by Dr. Sarah Oktay and Bob DaCosta, a member of the Select Board at the time. The other members appointed by the Select Board were Carl Borchard, Jamie Feely, Bam Lafarge, Emily Molden, Kurt Ryden, and John Stover. The Coastal Management Plan Work Group divided the island into 10 sections and recommended specific action plans for each section. There are 16 action items recommended in the Coastal Management Plan that require sand for nourishment. And then in our slides, we pulled graphics right out of the Coastal Management Plan, which identifies these 16 sites that are considered priority by the Coastal Management Plan Work Group to provide resiliency because they are prone to erosion. They are town sites, and they are spread all around the island. Each site is identified, and it has about 5 or 6 action plans, one of which includes beach nourishment. And I won't read those all, but I will mention the sites to just give us all an idea about how island-wide this is. The first one is at Quays Road, the public access at Quays Road. Massachusetts Avenue in Nantucket. Ames Street and Hither Creek in Nantucket. These all require beach nourishment. Nantucket Road. Sheep Pond Road. Hummock Pond Road. West Myacomet Road. East Myacomet Road. South Shore Road by the sewer beds. Western Avenue and Surfside Road. Nonantum Road. Tom Nevers Road. Codfish Park Road. Hoyks Hollow Road. Sasakaja Road. And Squam Road. Since the town has a plan that documents the need for nourishment, beach nourishment, at 16 sites around the island, it would not, in our view, be in the town's best interest to sell the sand currently stockpiled at Shadbush Road. In addition, it is prudent for the town to have stockpiled sand available to meet any emergencies, especially those caused by severe weather events. We believe the town should cancel the proposed contract and find another town-owned land location to stockpile the 9,500 cubic yards of sand if the property at Shadbush Road is needed for other purposes. Thank you.
Bill Greeter, Nantucket. Last week I spoke as a curmudgeon from Nantucket. I'm still a curmudgeon, but this week I'm speaking on behalf of Nantucket Conservation Board. This week we voted to request the Select Board to cancel the contract for the sale of the 9,500 cubic yards of dewatered sand from the Pulpus Harder dredging project currently stored on the town property at Shadbush, and to use the sandbank for town purposes on the 16 town-owned locations identified in the coastal management plan adopted in 2014. So what do we know? We know that the CMP was completed in 2014 after multiple hearings and stuff, and we understand that as time goes on, plans have to be adjusted. But to date, we haven't seen that discussion or that change or that adopting or tweaking of that plan. But we do have the 16 identified areas currently, and they haven't gone away. We know that there was 2 dredging permits in process. One was completed, the Pulpus one. But what is it that we don't know? We don't know, from a public point of view, the status of the Nantucket dredging plan. There is confusion when you talk about dredging in Nantucket because there's multiple sites that have been talked about. Obviously, you're not going to get sand out of some of these sites, but the fact that when you talk about dredging in Nantucket, people get confused because there's the question about the ditch dredging, there's a question about Heather Creek dredging, there's a question about Nantucket Harbor dredging. All different entities, all different types of product, but nonetheless, that adds to the confusion from the general public. So another question we don't know is, of these 16 identified sites, are we actually officially monitoring these from a town perspective, or have they just been identified and we're not actively monitoring? It sounds like the original 2 sand storage sites, that there was an issue, one with the size and now one with the location is slated or is looked at to be reused. One would think if we're going to establish a sandbank location that that's what it is in perpetuity, because this project, we are on a sandbar, this project is going to have to go on in perpetuity as the give and take. And coastal erosion is nothing new. One of the most interesting things that I've done this winter is take a couple of walks with Alan Reinhardt through the moors and listen to his talk about the island being formed from the glacier. And when he brings up the fact that it used to be dry land to the continental shelf way back, well, that's not dry land anymore. So we've been losing land to water for many, many years, and we know it's going to continue. But we can't keep ignoring the fact, and the fact that we have a 2014 plan, I would certainly hope that we revisit it, undertake tweaking it, and go on about saving our public property. Thank you.
Are any of those sites permitted and ready to receive nourishment?
No.
Okay.
Hi there, Edie Ray. I live at 60 Myacomet Avenue, which is on the very thin upper part of Myacomet Pond. So when I was looking at this and hearing about selling of the sand, I started thinking about back in the early 2000 time period when Myacomet Pond was opened on an emergency basis because both sides of the pond, the roads that run along there were flooded, and homeowners had concerns about not having access to their property for emergency equipment and such. And the pond was opened in the usual way that our ponds are, with, the big scoop thing. And interestingly enough, almost all the water fell out. The pond was very, very high, as it is now. And literally up at our end, there was no water. Halfway down the pond, there was pretty much no water. Fish were flapping and, whatever. And then it became evident that the pond was not going to close on its own. And the water just kept flowing out, fed by springs that come out of the banks along the pond. And the DPW, I'm not sure if they themselves or if they hired a contractor to do it, had to come and physically move sand from one portion of the beach to the other. I just checked with Dave Franzuto, who has an amazing memory, and he remembered that someone actually had to stand there and say, well, you can take sand from here, but not from over there, in order to close the pond again, because it was not closing itself. Now, we all know that in the spring, Sacajah and Hummock Pond get opened on an annual basis in the spring and again in the fall. So this spring, the ponds are really, really high. Anybody that's been out and around, y'all can see that. So when it gets open, there's going to be a tremendous movement of water. Now, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but what happens if those ponds won't close? What happens if we need to truck sand in from somewhere else in order to close those ponds? What kind of an impact is that going to have if they're just allowed to drain and drain and drain because we just sold the sand that we might need to shore it up? I don't know if you've all had a chance to go out and walk those beaches. I suggest you do. And you can see how thin the amount of beach is between the ocean and the pond itself. And as a matter of fact, I was out birding, which is not a surprise to most people, during the storm, and I was actually watching the ocean water coming over the thin part of the dune at the end of Myacomet and bringing salt water into the pond. It was doing that at Hummock Pond, too. It was amazingly dramatic. So that beach is very thin. The beach profile, as per usual in the winter, is very low. And I'm just thinking, what's going to happen in the spring? Now, Myacomet Pond is not permitted to be opened currently, I don't believe, but there is, maybe going to be happening in the future. So I'm just thinking about this spring and what might happen. And I'm wondering, I think our last person was wondering if there are permits already in the works for several other dredging projects, and maybe what the sand is going to, how much sand is going to be coming from those things. It's not going to happen before those ponds are opened. I can guarantee that. So what happens? I mean, I know it's a what if, but I'm a what if kind of person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. The main reason I'm saying this is because this project was under my department when it started, and I think there's a little bit of misconception as to what our dredge plan, how it started, where it was going. Dave Franzuto gave you a pretty good idea, but I think he left a key part out. The dredge plan, when it was conceived, went to town meeting, got funding for $150,000, I believe. It was purely a navigation plan to enhance navigation abilities in the navigable waters. It wasn't about beach nourishment. It wasn't about anything else. The money for that project, correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty much gone for what we've designed there, and it's not even complete. It went quick. There's a lot of sand that needs to be removed in different areas. And the town has since identified other areas that are not navigation related that are in needs. Some of the ponds, the ditch, different places like that are in need for conservation reasons to be dredged or cleaned out. The idea of the sandbank was to provide either the funding or the materials to do those projects. And the coastal zone management or coastal management plan is, in my analogy right now, is kind of like the Sears Christmas catalog. And people are looking at it like children, like it's full of great ideas, but we don't have the money to buy any of that. We don't have the permission, i.e. the permits, to do any of it, to get any of it. This $240,000 will go a long ways towards funding the remainder of that dredge plan, which now has components to also dredge sand, identify locations where it'll go, and tie it in with the 16 or more sites in the coastal management plan. thing. This is the funding that's available. If this 240,000 isn't available, then it'll be, 2022 before we can get a chance to go to the budget process again to try to get more funding to keep that dredge plan going. And right now, it's minimum 2 years, if not 3 to 5 years, to get many of these projects permitted. We need to get that started sooner rather than later, so that, Pulpus Harbor kind of was a one-off. We got that done because if we hadn't have done something, it was going to become Pulpus Pond, and it wouldn't have been Pulpus Harbor anymore. We were down the 2-foot draft. It never was intended to be anything more than just let's get this open and out.
Thank you. Board? So, go ahead.
Just a simple question about permits. My question is, I believe it was Dave Franzuta who got up and said that the permits were done.
Oh, Lorinda, could you just introduce
He's
yourself?
not there. Is that better?
Just introduce yourself.
I'm sorry.
For the
Lorinda
record.
LeCain, Nantucket. I think it was Dave said that the permits were done for the Pulpus dredging and included the sandbank somehow, whatever the permits were, however it was written, because I don't know that. And also, I think it was Libby said the SPPF had a permit in place already for this because they're the purchasers of this sandbank sand, of Shadbush sand. So my question is, are those two items true? I mean, how did SPPF have a permit already in hand to buy sand that they didn't know they could have?
They have a permit for beach nourishment.
For beach nourishment, and that extends forever? I mean, does it last forever? Is it written into it?
It's a requirement of their permit.
Of their permits? And what about the Pulpus dredging plan? The permit that Dave was alluding to?
I mean, that says something about selling the sand. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is.
The question is, Dave Franzuta was up and he was saying that, actually you can ask him, but he was saying that when the Pulpus dredging plan was conceived and permitted, the permits were still in effect that were viable for, I don't know how to say it, but the sandbank, let's say it, the sandbank, and it was destined for that permitting included all sand that would be used specifically for beach nourishment at different places on the island. So if that's true, then that permit is in place, right? And that other permit's in place. As we're saying that permitting could take too long. My question is, if we have a permit in place, does it count?
The permit that's in place is to have the sand where it is currently. That's it.
That's it?
To store it.
Store.
But if anyone holding a permit, whether it's a permit to replenish on an annual basis with 4 wheelbarrows or 40 dump trucks, whoever has a permit has the ability to bid on this sand. You don't, it just happens to be that SBPF has a greater need.
Yeah.
But if you had a permit for your property, for perfect example, and maybe you do have a permit from the Concom to do beach nourishment in front of your property, because you and I have talked about in front of your property. But that is a perfect example of where 100 or 200 cubic yards could go. You could bid on the sand in the future. But as the chief points out, as Libby pointed out, and I tried to point out, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's future sand needs to be available for all projects, especially the town, but also private.
Yeah, and there were 3 other bids, and we don't know what their intended use was, but they would have had to have been nourishment projects.
Well, one of the things that Libby didn't say in her explanation of the requirements by the bidder is they have to have a valid disposal permit, a valid beach nourishment permit, but you have to give the address. I mean, so if I'm somebody that decides I'm going to buy sand on speculation of being able to sell it in the future for $100 a cubic yard. I can't do that because I don't have an address, because the DEP is part of the permit. And I don't want Eric to be bothered with this, but there's a place in the permit that says that you have to track this sand from cradle to grave, if you will, from where you dredged it to where you stored it to who bought it and where it's going to be placed. Nobody can buy this sand on speculation.
So it was all in those bids, exact locations that they each intended to use it at? Yes or no? Or would they have had to provide that if they were the winning bidder?
Can you repeat the question, Don?
In all of the bids, did each identify the location where they planned to use it, or would it be something they had to provide once they won the
Sure. So Jeff
bid?
Carlson, the Natural Resources Director. So amazingly enough, Erica already has it on the screen, is the purchase agreement between the town and any private entity. The first thing that has to be provided is the proof of existed valid permit authorizing for beach nourishment at the property of interest. So you have to provide a current order of conditions with address-specific information as part of the purchase agreement with the town. The second part that's there, you don't need to scroll up for it, is the public access easement requirement. So you have to have all of that in hand and provided, and to allow for the public use of any private land being nourished with that material. And then the third part is proof of payment. So those are the three things that are required by the DEP permit for the dredging project in Pulpus Harbor.
But was each one of those provided in the bid?
Or does that come afterwards?
Or does it come afterwards? No, I'm just curious what the other locations were where they intended to use the sand.
We wouldn't even have looked at them because once we determined that the high bidder, that's the only one you look at to determine if they're responsible and responsive to the bid. If they were determined not to be, then we would have gone through the same process with all three of the other bids that were received until we determined either one was or one wasn't. So whether they had it or not wouldn't have come into it because there was a bid that was higher than those three.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on this. So I think we're looking for fairness, and like what would, not to pick on Reese or Toscano, but what would they do? Where is their beach nourishment projects, and how would that work? So I think it's a good question.
If I could just make one other quick comment. When we did the dredging of Pulpus Harbor, our intent was to nourish the beach along that area out by Pulpus Harbor. It's just that current law requires if you use that sand and put it on a private beach, that beach owner has to give you permanent access, public right of access to that beach. None of those property owners out there were willing to do that. Therefore, we ended up having to store the sand. It would have been used to nourish that beach out there like it was the last time it was dredged.
And so SBPF meets that requirement because it's already a public beach.
They all have signed easements on that.
Just making sure everything's as clear as possible. Rick?
Good evening. My name is Rick Atherton. Just kind of an observation as you deliberate on what to do. I think it's clear that the DEP approval called for all the sand to be used for nourishment purposes. So I think there's no disputing that. It just seems to me that the method by which you're exercising the sale option, which is in the DEP approval, seems to be all or nothing. And as Mr. Franzuto pointed out, there are lots of projects on the island, public and private, that might well have uses for this. And I think the board and the community would be better served by a process that opened it up so it wasn't all or nothing. And you thought about a process and advertising and contacting people who might have a need for the sand, because we've all heard there's a real shortage, and a lot of the sand now that has to be used on projects may have to come from off island. I think that's in everybody's best interest rather than just a one-shot deal where there's no reserve. You might decide it's best to sell as quickly as you can 6,000 tons or yards, whatever these things are, as opposed to the whole shebang. And I just don't think there'd been a consideration of that kind of an option or many other options for your consideration before the RFP went out. Thank you.
Stephen Cohen, attorney. I represent the winning bidder, Wisconsin Beach Preservation Fund. I'll try to be brief. I think there's already been quite a bit of time spent on this. I think Libby did a great job of explaining why it would not be in the town's operational or economic interest to delay the project that the sand is being moved for. I think that Dan did a great job showing that the town has a plan in place for future projects that might someday be permitted that it could use the sand for, but none of those are permitted now, and the sand couldn't be used for those now. And I think the point here is that what everybody is saying is exactly what this sand is being used for, okay? And in fact, it's a double win if my client gets it, because first, the $240,000 bid, that money is going to go to do future dredging to create more sand to clean up Pulpus Harbor and to have sand that the town can either sell or use in the future, and it creates that town benefit instead of a town cost. But also, SBPF is putting this sand in front of a 950-foot geotube project, which is designed to protect a nearly vacant stretch of Baxter Road, which is a public road where there's public water and public sewer. It's not protecting most of the homes there at the moment. It's mostly protecting the public infrastructure. And the beach that the sand is going to be placed on and washed up on, as my friend Dan often tells us, is the town public beach. So therefore, the public beach is being nourished, and the public infrastructure is being protected, and the money is being used to generate more sand that the town can use in the future when it's ready for other projects. There's no downside here. My client bid on this sand and was 150 times the next bid. Okay, the next bid was about $100,000, and this is $240,000. There's no reason why this shouldn't move forward, but I've heard a lot of reasons about what the town should be doing in the future to make sure that it's acting responsibly, and I'm sure that Libby and other people will make sure that that's put in place. But none of it has justified canceling this bid and going back against the advice of town council to start parceling it out and other things that would slow down the Marine Department project and also yield far less money. If somebody else had permits in place and was ready to go and was willing to spend 150% more at the benefit of the town, they had that opportunity under a 30B bidding process. And nobody came forward and said, I'd really like to buy it for that purpose. So I appreciate that the town staff put a lot of thought into how to best deal with this, and there was a public and legal bidding process, and my client won that process. And there are a lot of people here tonight who are thinking, okay, well, we have ideas for things you should do in the future and other things you should be doing. None of this prevents that from happening. It all should happen. And I'd ask you to approve and confirm the winning bid and move forward both with the bid and with the other great ideas that we've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Just say your name for the record, please.
Yvonne Valancourt, for the record. I was at the Coastal Resiliency meeting recently, which was fantastic. And so I'm not going to talk very long, but I have concerns that such a large amount of time that went into the coastal management plan that was approved in 2014 that set this sandbank up for municipal works and for emergency sandbank access. So permitting is, I understand everything everyone's saying about how great it would be to sell it, but I think if you're honestly going to do that, you should be very careful, and maybe a working group would be a better idea to go forward where you, if you're going to do this for the first time, it's going to lay out a precedent, and it could fund all of these nourishment projects, But my question, and I have a lot, but I won't ask all of them, is if you sell all this and then you have a great need for it because of an emergency, and we all know how frequent storms are now presenting us with issues that we can't handle. And this is the town and the islands, the community's sand. If you're going to go there and start selling it so that you can have money to do things, I think you need a plan before you just do it. And transparency is the fair thing to do for everybody who owns the sand, because everyone owns it. So I think there's a lot here that makes sense on both sides. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. But I think if you're not sure what to do, maybe you ought to pull in some people to help you make that plan, because it should be a plan. If you sell all of this and then the community really needs sand because of an emergency, what are you going to do? Are you going to buy it with that money, or how are you going to? How quickly can you dredge and produce what the Coastal Resiliency Group, who meets twice a month and is asking for volunteers to come and help? And what do they have? 3 people showing up. What do we? This is really great. You have all these options. You have the sandbank and you have the capacity to sell it. But what exactly are you going to do? And how are you going to do that? And I think the community should know that before it happens. I think they should be able to have a say in that before it's actually decided. And I don't know. So, thank you.
Thoughts?
You want to go first, Matt?
I have a quick question. I will in a minute. A question for Brian. One idea that came up was on the sandbank was, we put it out to bid, and it's a bid, and we have to sell it to the high bidder. If we had a sandbank and we wanted to set a price on it, how would we do that? If someone could buy 3 truckloads or 3 dump loads, how would we do that legally?
We'd have to probably determine a value and then set the minimum price that we would accept for it. But
Right.
I mean, this was conducted as an open competitive bid.
Now, I'm not talking
Yeah.
about this. I understand this whole situation, and
Yep.
it's somewhat unfortunate, and we'll talk about that. But I'm
We'd have
saying
to work
in the
through
future,
the mechanics in the future of doing that.
in the
yeah.
future, what would we? I want to make sure that we're not back in the same situation where a bunch of people need it, and we have one high bidder, and there's nothing we can do. So, how do we set it up in the
We
future?
could probably accomplish that in the future, depending on how much we had, by selling it in phased quantities.
Okay.
To see what that was,
Yeah, or
something like that.
could we put a set price on it, like you said? And
I'd have to go back and read the manual all again but there's a possibility we could manage it in an auction type situation like that.
well, because I'm thinking about, the digester we get out. We got the remnants on the digester. We sell compost, and we don't bid that. We have X amount for compost. The same thing could happen for sand. I don't know how, but we need to figure that out so that we're not in this situation again. That's just a comment for the record. I just think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Kind of my thoughts and questions is, we've identified the 16 locations. Is it something that this sand can definitely be used and permitted for? So I would hate to cancel the bid and then find out in a couple of months that we couldn't use the sand in some of those locations.
I think it would take a lot more than a couple of months. We'd have to do permitting and match studies and things like that.
So we don't know if the sand can definitely be used in these 16 locations.
No, I don't believe so. We haven't done that sort of testing. Each location has to have its own particular testing. You have to compare the sand at that site to this. This would have to be tested, screened.
Okay.
And
Not that
those
it can't be
16
done, but-
locations are independent of any privately permitted projects. Those were additional identified areas, aside from other things that are already being done.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, they the town identified areas from that
Yeah,
study.
that the town would be
Right.
responsible for.
Yeah, I think also something that hasn't really been mentioned, we didn't have staff dedicated to the dredge plan, to the coastal management plan, to the coastal resiliency plan until the last 12 months. And now that we have a committee working on the coastal resiliency plan, the coastal management plan was more of a starting point. It doesn't have the details of exactly how these sites would be, in fact, doesn't really mention permitting. It doesn't mention frequency. It didn't evaluate other potential measures for erosion control there. And that is what the coastal resiliency plan is supposed to be doing. So I think we're a little bit waiting for that to get completed to help better inform us as to these specific sites. Maybe there's others. Maybe they've been replaced by different sites by now. I don't think we totally know yet.
I think that's a really good point, that we also have Vince Murphy, who can coordinate the dredge plan and make sure that all these projects are put forward.
Let me correct one thing that people kept talking about is how we're making money. We're making money. We took in $240,000, but it cost us $1.3 million to dredge, if I had the numbers right. So this isn't, dredging isn't a positive endeavor. It's $1 million loser. So the thought that this is going to be self-fulfilling is not the case. We are going to have to find a way to fund quite a bit of money for some of this stuff. It's not a, Anyway, it's sort of, I kept hearing, oh, and this is going to do this and this and this. It's going to do maybe half of one thing. $240,000 doesn't last very long in today's environment for these types of things. So, and not that it's a bad thing, but it's not the solution.
There's also the resources from the state. I know that Governor Baker just gave us money for dredging, a grant. So there are other resources too.
That's one comment question I had is, we get money from, so we dredge, we get the sand, we sell, we get money to do the next project, and we dredge, we get the sand, and we sell it to do the next project. It's not, so I'm glad you brought that up, Matt. It's not enough, but at least we're getting something from it. I think it's difficult to be able to dredge and then coordinate, and maybe we'll be able to do this with Vincent and staff. Maybe this is one of the challenges, to dredge. We have the sand, and it immediately goes in, kind of what Dave said. We cut out the middleman. We don't grab it. It just goes from, you dredge it and goes right where it should go. I don't know. I'm assuming if it was already done in Quidnet and Pocomo and previous Pulvis Harbor dredges, then it could be done in future ones, even if it's in another side of the island. I don't know. If that can happen, that's how it should happen. I think we're all in agreement there. It's unfortunate that it didn't. Rick, your suggestion is really good. Unfortunately, we can't do that. If we cancel the bid, we can't go back and do it again and sell 2/3 of it, but that's what we should have done, some version of it. Sure.
But what you could do, I think, if you decided to cancel, I know that's a tough thing, just what Matt was asking about, so that all the smaller projects around the island would have equal access if you set a price. And they could hire an independent trucker, he picks up the sand, and have to be approved and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the private projects are already approved. Many of them on Eel Point Road, I expect Mr. Carlson would know this better than I do, but already have delivered 3 annual sand nourishments. And they ought to be permitted, presumably because they're already doing it. Anyway, it seems to me that's a more community equitable way to answer your question, which is a good one.
I just remember Brian saying last week. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in this bid, could someone have put in a bid for a portion of the sand rather than the whole thing, or it was definitely an all or nothing? They could have gotten together as a group and done it. Okay.
And I believe I read from town council that if we cancel this bid, that's it. There's no
We can't
other
rebid it.
option of different types of bidding, or it's ours.
Yeah, it's ours. We got to save it and use it for ourselves. That's basically what he said.
Ours.
I have another sort of question. What will it take? Because it seems like we're changing our sand locations, that we've got permission now to have the sand stockpiled, on the picture we saw earlier and at the dump. But it seems like we're going to build on the Shadbush, and the dump says they don't have room. What is it going to take to change the permit? Is that an easy thing to change
I'm
for the
not sure,
receiving areas?
But we still need a place.
So anytime you need to dredge, you have to have a permitted sand disposal location. So you can identify a sand disposal location independent with every project. You could have 100 that go with 100 different projects. This specific project permitted the DPW yard and the Shadbush location, and also attempted to permit the area in Quays that ended up not being viable. So if we did a project where we wanted to dredge at the town pier, we could permit another location in Nantucket, in town, wherever, as long as it met the DEP standards.
Right, and so can we dredge in Pulpus again, or are we done now that we finished?
So
Do we have to apply again, or can we dredge again?
So the permit that's in place from the court and DEP right now allows for some additional maintenance dredging within the permit window. The permit that was issued in 2016 is a 5-year permit, and the Conservation Commission permit also allows for some limited maintenance dredging, and that permit was a 3-year permit kind of issued in that same time window. So if it's anything beyond that under the current permitting, you would probably have to apply again.
So I have to apply again anyway, okay. And what I was sort of driving at is, if we have bank locations, we want to make sure we keep those bank locations, that we don't change them into something else. It doesn't sound like it makes a difference really, but that's what I was trying to figure out.
Jason?
Louis, did you say that if this bid was go through, the $240,000 does not just go into the abyss of the general fund?
Yeah, it has to go for specific projects related to beach nourishment and dredging.
All right, so I thought it was the other way, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, and I got a little bit of this from what Dave was saying, that the sandbank can be looked at as a physical sandbank, but also somewhat a monetary sandbank, where the funding goes back in to fund the next source of sand, the permitting and so forth. So it's not as literal as I think everyone's
Well, but I think
thinking of it in
it's
terms
pretty
of it
clear that
being
we're going to
physical.
need it's pretty
Need
clear
to
we're going to
save
need
sand, too.
we're going to need a stockpile of it somewhere, and where does it stay? I mean, I think that's fairly obvious, and so, I think we need to figure that out and not build on top of it or do something else and then be 2 or 3 years out because, we forgot. I mean, I think we have to, sort of has to keep front and center.
I don't want you to think that we forgot where the sandbank was supposed to be. It took a very long time between the time that Pulpus Harbor dredging happened and the time the permit was initially issued. There was a gap, and it took longer to start than we thought. And in the meantime, things happened out at Public Works that eliminated the area where the sand was going to go, and there was a bit more sand that was dredged than was originally anticipated as well. I agree, though, Matt, we need to find a place to put the sand. It's a big amount. Maybe there will be bigger amounts as we go, but I think one of the concepts of the dredge plan is that it would coincide with wherever a project is. So there wouldn't necessarily be a need to stockpile the sand somewhere. It would pretty quickly go from dredging, whatever the dewatering situation is, right to the beach nourishment project. So there wouldn't be a lot of need to store it.
Right, and I'm sorry, my comment might have been a little flippant saying that, but at the same time, we don't have either of those now are available. And I just think that, and I think as a policy, is we should have a place where we can put sand, and have a good stockpile for some of the issues that people talked about tonight. So, as a policy, I think we should have a physical stockpile of it, even if it's just enough to do the end of Nantucket Road and the end of, a couple roads that we know are going to be an issue every couple of years. I mean, anyway, so.
And one of the, I don't love the idea of moving the sand to where these potential contractor lots. I already think we're years behind on this. As Golaki land is pretty much over. We need more commercial space for landscapers, masons, just for our commercial entities, and that's one of the very few last places. So if that sand gets moved there, it's there for 3 to 5 years.
I had that concern too.
And we're already behind on that.
Can I just clarify slightly? I think what we were saying was the sand would stay where it is, but we'd build the Marine Department building on the contractor lots. Sort of same difference.
Kind of same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the contractor lot thing, though, we're a couple of years away from that anyway. I don't know that we would be using the sand up in that amount of time to clear the site where it is now for the contractor lots. You follow? So it may be some time anyway for the contractors' lots, but there could be a bit of an impact there, which I think is what your point is.
Yeah, I think we're already behind on it, with all the million things that we have on our plate. But that's just be another reason to not go forward with that.
We were waiting for the bulk fuel and everything to work out before we were even thinking about this.
Okay.
That's true, yeah, to make sure we didn't.
Can I ask, what is the Marine buildings?
It's a layup building. It was in the capital plan.
What does it look like? For the,
Oh, I think it's a steel framed building, and it's for storing the boats and doing some light maintenance on them.
Okay.
So that right now the boats are kind of scattered about, as well as other equipment, ramps and floats and stuff like that. So the idea is to have a central location for all of that stuff. Undercover.
Okay. I mean, I think we've had a good discussion. It's 7:10. Do we want to make a decision on this evening?
I think my issue last week was we didn't have all this extra information. So I think we have a little more. I don't know if delaying it anymore will give us any more information, maybe a little bit.
Just checking on what you all want to do.
I think, I think, it's unfortunate. I think that I wish that we had dug into this a little deeper. I wish we had sort of more closely followed some of the, coastal management plan suggestions and had thought through a little bit of how can we individually sell sand and keep it, but we didn't. And so we are where we are. And I think that there's, if we keep it, we keep it, it'll get used at some point and we'll somehow use it, et cetera. But I think, we're hearing that we then don't have money to do the further dredging and get the next thing started. I think that we're sort of in a box and should approve it. I think that we should approve it and improve the process going forward. I think we should figure out how to sell it fairly. I think we should figure out, sort of how to ensure that all the aspects are looked at, not, and doesn't just show up on a Wednesday night and and everyone goes crazy. I just think that's not really the right way to be doing things. So.
I'm leaning towards that way, but I'm worried that we're going to be back here later and we didn't learn our lesson because there's no policy in place. And maybe Coastal Resiliency Committee's doing that.
That's 2 years out. There's a lot of things that people say, oh, that's a coastal resiliency, we'll get to that. We just today and I'll talk about it later, but we just today put out the RFP, and we're probably 2 years away from a plan, and then we're probably a year or two away from implementation on it. In the meantime, some of these things are still happening fairly quickly. So I don't hold that as the,
Well, could we agree that where sand is involved, that it comes to the board for discussion prior to issuing an RFP next time, to maybe look at multiple options on how to do it? Is that fair?
We thought we were doing what was in the permit.
Yeah.
We're not going to have sand like this for quite a while.
Okay.
But yes.
But, so just so it's on the record.
Sure.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're, yeah.
And I agree with Matt, just trying to look into the process a little bit more. What I learned today was the process where the Pulpus owners didn't want to give that permanent easement, and that's a Massachusetts law. So just kind of digging into that a little bit more of, is there anything that we could do locally so that it could have been dredged and then nourished on the beach right away? And I don't know what that takes and how we could look into it or change it. That's always, Nantucket's always unique.
Well, I think that I like seeing the public access tied into that license. I think, and I like seeing the state want that to happen. But I think seeing that people don't even want, free or cheap sand to do that on their beach tells you how they view it. So I think that's, one of the things I worry about in all of this is, sort of the decisions we make and the impacts of those decisions on, future negotiations, future litigation, and ending up losing some of those rights if we're not careful. And so I just, I'd err at the side of selling the sand than being a situation where we're making it worse. And I didn't explain that well, but.
To your point about the easements, the town tried for 2 years to negotiate with those people. And the chief was partially correct, but there are 12 entities, the town being one, land bank being one. And we just couldn't get everybody in agreement, and it was free sand. So we had to do something with it because we had to dredge. As you heard, it was the navigation issue. So, I mean, we did what we felt was right at the time.
Right. Thank you.
And those properties are still eroding.
The properties are still eroding.
They aren't any better. And so so that whole issue is tied with these.
Well, I guess that's what concerns me about the future of the next dredging project, where we think we can just line it up, where it'll go to where it needs to go. And if we run into the same issue, we're going to have the stockpile again. So making sure we have a good policy of how we're going to sell the sand if it stockpiles again.
It's great that the state's going to give us money to help us dredge in the future, but we're going to have to put more money into this, more than just the money we're going to sell from this project or any other. Make a commitment to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with the coastal resiliency plan and how we're going to prioritize why we need it so much.
Scott Corey, Nantucket, and it's just it's a legal question, I guess. I read the DEP's permit, and it clearly presupposes the town's establishment of the sandbank. Now, does failing to do that pose any downstream threat to future approvals for similar projects? I don't know.
Unlikely. No, I don't think it would.
Anyone ready to make a motion?
I guess I'll hold my nose and move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously to award the contract. Okay. Next up, we are going to call a joint meeting with ourselves at the NRTA Advisory Board. And Paula is here to walk us through some options for summer service.
The first thing I'd like to do is call your attention to option number 2. It should be 128 days and not 108 days. So after the last discussion on January 22nd, understanding what the select board would like to achieve for this summer as far as service into town, and what is existing and what is available to actually do something for this summer, I've presented you with 3 different scenarios. Each one is 20-minute service, serving the general public from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And majority of that would be extending the airport route for a number of days when it's not currently operating, and then extending the hours when it is. The other issue was to maintain the 20-minute service, not pulling directly into the lot, but identifying bus stops, on Old South Road that could accommodate a waiting area for the passengers. And is Mike is not here.
Yep, Mike's there behind you.
Oh, come here. He talked about, we talked about using outbound, the driveway portion of the entrance, and then there's a current stop just at the Wannacomet Water Company driveway on Old South Road that is used by some of the contractors that use the lot, but it dips down, drops off. So either that would need to be brought up to ground grade, or identifying another area more in front of the Islander and Fisaros on the inbound side that's flat and would have some room. And I know that Mike provided these slides when he and I talked. There may have been some more discussions that I was not involved in as far as the bus stop location. I think we need to, as you consider this, keep in mind, if we're not directly servicing the park and ride lot, we're already asking people to walk, and having something within close proximity that they will be encouraged to walk to, I think, is paramount if you're going to provide this type of service for the summer. So that would need to be figured out.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Have we looked in or talked to Rob or anybody? Could that be done before the end of this, beginning of this season? Those little pull-offs? If we haven't looked at it, that's my answer.
I think there were some discussions, like I said, that I wasn't privy to, and whether it could meet the time frame, I don't know.
Okay. I'll ask after you're done.
Okay.
Again.
The other thing would, if you wanted to do this, would be, of course, the source of funding. As you know, we've used the new service through the local assessment to fund extended hours and the winter service, and that could be used for a portion of the FY20. We could call it a new commuter service. Could fund FY20, but the FY21 service would then not qualify as new service, as it would be in a different fiscal year. So another funding source that would be consistent would be required. And that's why I broke down under the options by fiscal year, as well as total operating, so that you could see what those dollar amounts were.
Okay. I mean, I definitely like to figure out the stops. And I mean, just to throw it out there, I personally think that right after Memorial Day till right after Labor Day would probably be sufficient for a starting year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like option 3.
But I mean, I do want to see what our plan is for the following year to make this even better and more reliable, and have the proper vehicles that we need to just try and get to that more like 10 to 15 minutes. And have the buses be able to actually pull into the parking lot.
I understand that. Just to say, I don't know if it'll be the next summer or the summer after that with the vehicle situation, just with the procurement and building and state funding. And
I think you said 5 to 6 months, right?
Once you have procurement.
But last time you were here, you said it would take 5 to 6 months. That's why we couldn't do it this season. So now I'm hearing like we might not be able to do it next season.
Well, once the procurement's through, depending on who the bidder is and the time frame, yes.
But we could start that now.
Yes. Actually, it's on my schedule next week. It's not an easy process, and I have to check on some legalities with it. But yeah,
I'm sure it's.
I'm it's my next week.
I would want Rob to weigh in on the stops. I don't know how much work it is and stuff like that. And while he's coming up, Paula, just, I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to talk to you before now, but the funding, just to clarify, my understanding has been that this would probably be funded through the cherry sheet, so we wouldn't come up with outright money. So when you say new service, how is that funded? Is that funded
That
through
would be the
state?
cherry sheet, the local assessment and the local
So
aid.
the whole thing, so what's the difference really between new service and?
Well, because the local assessment falls on a fiscal year, it would be new service from that May until June and then July.
So it's just a timing thing?
But you can't use, once it's new service, it won't fall into new service in FY21 that could hit the cherry sheet.
So what
It would
does that
only be
mean?
for
We have to
FY20.
come up with money outright?
For
Or-
FY21.
So we'd have to find $104,880 for this year?
FY21.
Okay.
Here's a question. What if we went July 1st? Would that mean if we opened the service on July 1st, would it all be new service for that whole
Yes.
year?
From July 1st until June.
So maybe
June
that's better.
30th. Do you want to start? I mean, I think for the purpose, that would be a way of getting around the funding, absolutely. But for the purpose of it, starting in July, you may not get those targeted people that you're specifically looking for because they've been doing something for a month and a half. And whether they would change their pattern, that would be my only, but yes, July 1st. It
Would solve the
gets
funding
you-
issue at
Gets
least.
you with the new service.
I went and looked back at a little bit of the valet parking data from their service, and they tend not to be busy until about July 1st, but they're really busy through September. So I was kind of more looking at option 2 where it went till September 30th. So maybe it would be a July 1st to September 30th where we would use the service.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, it might be the way to go for this year.
But are they, I don't know if they could tell from the valet who the people are.
It's
Are
just
they
busier in
commuters
town.
or are they visitors? So I'm just thinking, I don't know. I don't really know. It's just busier, yeah, but by who?
I know we get busier the beginning of June now, more so than we used to in years past.
But with commuters or?
A little bit of everybody.
Yeah, because not to harp on this, but I think our goal with this was a commuter shuttle, which certainly doesn't mean people can't take it down to the boat and stuff like that. We want to cover those groups too. But the idea, I think, and maybe we need to outline our goal a little more clearly, is to get people who work downtown to and from downtown without their car quickly and reliably and easily.
Yeah, and I understand that. But you also wanted something for this summer, so that's what I've outlined here.
I'm not as concerned about driving through the lot to pick people up. I think that's a reasonable walk out to there, and I think if that enables us to add one more bus and make this whole route, one bus quicker, and not this year, but in a couple of years from now, I think that's not a bad result, because that's where most of the employees live, sort of these corridors, and I think that's going to increasingly get busier. So another, if that can be 8 or 10 minutes or 15 when it's busy in the summer instead of 20 or 25, I think we've made a huge improvement.
Yep, and I think, tying the airport route makes sense with all the new flights and all of that the airport's indicated coming through. You get at that end, you get the contractors, you get the boat people, you get the commuters. I think the more people that can use it for different reasons, the better off it's going to be.
Can I say Mike made a really smart suggestion?
Oh.
Right? What do you think, Mike? Right at the end?
He's so smart. I set him up for that,
And having it along the airport route, people could also technically, even though 2 Fairgrounds is free, they could use the airport lot as a park and ride if they wanted to pay for that day and then take the shuttle into town for work.
Yep.
Just gives you another parking option.
Rob, do you want to talk about the stops?
Sure. So I did get a copy of the proposal. I provided some comments back. My thought was that the outbound was sort of a shoulder widening here. We did a little bit of that when we did the temporary roundabout last year, so it would sort of be an extension of that. The inbound was proposed roughly opposite the driveway for 2FG. And the grade right there is actually pretty steep. It would require a fair amount of clearing, and the grade itself would require a fair amount of material to be brought in and constructed. And the introduction of a new crosswalk, which would give us 3 crosswalks within about 1,000 feet or less, which tends to slow down traffic. So what we thought about for an alternative to the inbound stop that was being proposed here was to utilize the existing inbound stop, which up until recently was fairly underutilized as far as a pull-off goes, because this, if you can see this tiny dark rectangle in the front at that stop, had a split rail fence that I believe largely prevented buses from actually pulling out of the lane, getting out of the way to allow traffic flow while they picked up and dropped off passengers. So as part of our annual brush maintenance along the corridor, you may have seen recently that, excuse me, DPW has, along a number of locations, removed split rail fence. This particular location, we have removed it and left it out. So the buses are now able to. I'm not sure operationally if the buses are actually pulling off into that space, but they're certainly able to at this point. So it would be a matter of, if they use that for the inbound, we would simply freshen up the paint for the crossing, and then they would have essentially an equidistant walk from the parking lot to that stop as they would out to any new proposed temporary location. And we felt that that was the more preferred location. Right now, the commercial parking lot right now is expected to be expanded with a little additional removal of vegetation along those 2 areas. And there's actually an existing path into the Keeper's parking lot, which we would work to make sure that that was open and able to be navigated, and would add some signage to the rear of this lot, the parking lot, that would encourage people for the inbound bus stop to go that direction, to get onto the sidewalk, go down to the crosswalk, and utilize the inbound stop.
So that could be in place for this summer, you've laid out?
That certainly could be in place. Once again, this is just comments back to what Paula Mike had sent me, so we haven't really gone further than that.
Okay. So could we find the funding to be able to do the service in June?
If we started the service in FY21, July 1st, that would not hit the town's cherry sheet until FY23.
Mm-hmm. And if we were to start it in 20, it would hit the cherry sheet in 22, or, okay. So there's not an outright cash outlay for this. It would go on the cherry sheet,
No,
but
it would
at
start going
different
on the cherry
times?
sheet starting in 22, and then 21 service, correct me if I'm wrong, would ultimately be carried forward on the cherry sheet in 23.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't have to find it in the
Well, all I'm trying to get at
budget
is
for
that.
21.
Earlier, I thought there was a requirement that we'd have to have sort of like cash on hand to start this. It sounds like no.
No, but for if you're talking about starting at any time in FY20, before July 1st, that will be new service.
Mm-hmm.
July 1st is a new fiscal year, so it would not be considered new service in FY21, so there would need to be funding for it.
Okay, and when you say funding for it, what does that mean? A cash outlay to pay something, or?
Well, however you guys would.
So it doesn't go on the cherry sheet? I
It would
don't
for
understand.
FY20. If you're talking.
So what would happen in 22 then, in fiscal 22? What would happen then?
In FY20 would hit the cherry sheet in 22.
Mhm.
Yes, right?
Yep.
For option 3, that would be $102,720.
Right.
To continue it from July through Labor Day. In FY21, that's an additional $104,880 that would need to be found that would not be able to be used through the new service local assessment hitting the cherry sheet anywhere.
Yeah, explain the new service,
kind
how
of
that
key,
helps.
Yeah.
I know it does, but explain how it does.
New service, when the RTAs fought hard to get the language for local assessment changed so that if communities that belong to an RTA, such as Nantucket, wanted services to be provided within their community that the Transit Authority did not have the funding for, they could approve those services, anything new service, something that hasn't been provided, and have it hit the local assessment at 100% of the operating funding. That's done on a fiscal year.
But the thing is that what I'm confused about is that the new service that we did with year-round bus service, okay, started in a year, and then that year's completed, and that's not, we started that when? In 19, okay? So in 20, you had no funding, and we carried it over in a fiscal year, and it ultimately will hit the cherry sheet because the first year you're going to see it is 21. So I don't entirely understand the difference between starting a year-round a commuter shuttle in fiscal 20, calling it new service, and then saying that the town has to pay an extra $105,000 in the next fiscal year because it's not new service, because we didn't do that with year-round service.
We did.
The town didn't pay in fiscal.
No, but we started it with the fiscal year.
Right, but in fiscal 20, the town is not paying for year-round service, and it's not on the cherry sheet until fiscal 21.
Right.
So this is the same exact principle that we just employed by adding $500,000 to the cherry sheet for year-round service in fiscal 21 when we started in 19, and we're still doing it in fiscal 20. So I'm just kind of confused on the dynamics of how they're different.
Because the new service was started on a fiscal year.
Did we start that on July 1st?
Well, October, mid-October.
So then it's the same principle that we're dealing with right now, isn't it?
But it
Or
was October to June 30th.
Yes. And that doesn't hit the cherry sheet until fiscal 21.
Right.
So that was fiscal 19 that we started on. So that I'm just not understanding the dynamics of how these two are different because they're exactly the same situations, that's all.
Except with the fiscal year division.
No, they're the same. We started the year-round service in fiscal 19, which October of 2018, which was fiscal 19. Right?
Maybe we need to. But when I finish my FY20, and maybe we need to get some direction and then come back, because when I do my audit for FY20, this service is going to be an additional $102,720.
Correct.
That I'm going to assess
to the town
on
the cherry sheet. Yes.
And then July through whenever, September.
You will just continue to operate it, and you'll assess it to me on the fiscal 23 cherry sheet, just like the new service that we did in 19. There shouldn't be any difference. There should be no difference at all.
I think there is, but I would ask that we can sit down and dig into this, because I don't need to get caught with 104.
Well, the town doesn't want you to get caught either, but I don't see the difference between the two. That's why I'm asking the questions, I guess.
Because we purposely did year-round service so that it was in one fiscal year, so that we avoided that May start thing. So,
well, we started year-round service in October of 2018 because that'd be. If you started in 2019, it would be fiscal 20. So it's October of 2018.
Yes.
Because your fiscal 2019 audit and the certification that I received from the state said that the cherry sheet for fiscal 21 was almost $836,000.
Yep.
I'm not giving you any additional money in fiscal 20 for that very new service that started in fiscal 19 because it will be captured in the fiscal 22 cherry sheet. Correct? Which
I'm not swearing to that. I'm following you, but I don't think that's how we set up.
I can assure you we're not giving you any additional
No,
money in 20.
I know
so-
that, but that's
Yeah.
where I think the fiscal year division and how we did that so that it wasn't going to be.
Didn't
you
it
have all
just
the same
push it
costs this year.
out an extra? Didn't it just push it out a year, basically, by not starting it in May and starting it in October?
Well, if you started in October, no, it's the same fiscal year because the NRTA and the town are the same, July to June.
May here, and
right. Yeah,
it would have been different.
May to
fiscal
July
years.
pushes it out 1 year.
Yeah.
If we go from May or June into
If you
July.
go to July
It does the same
1st,
thing,
doesn't
though.
it push
does
it out a year?
because it's even to even, odd to odd for the NRTA for the cherry sheet. So in fiscal 19, when you started year-round service, we're paying for that fiscal 19 in 21. We're paying for fiscal 20 in 22.
22.
Okay? If you start commuter service, what I'm asking is, what is the
I
difference?
See where you're going.
There's no difference between this because if we start commuter service in fiscal 20 in May, we'll pay that $102,000 on the cherry sheet in fiscal 22. The NRTA would continue to operate it in 21, and I would pay in 23, just like we always do.
But that amount isn't going to increase for the operating costs. Like year-round service, I'm not hitting you again with another 400,000. That's already been paid. I'm only hitting you with the 2.5
Just like you
increase
just like you
of that, but it was
yeah,
for
but you
a
would do the
fiscal
same
year.
exact thing that you would do with year-round service. There's no difference. I don't believe there is, at least, based on the way the cherry sheet operates.
So provided we confirm that up, then,
It's a very confusing dynamic.
I'm going to let you guys figure out
He's
the
smarter than I
financial-
am, but he confuses me too. So
I think we are not quite saying it together, but I think we're on the same page. So let us figure out those details. But I just want to make sure we all know, as we were doing with the year-round service, that at some point on the cherry sheet, we are going to have an increased number, which will need to come out of our, levy limit. And that reduces what we use for other things. I know you know that, but I'm just reminding you.
Can I suggest that we go back to the option 3, May 26th to September 7th, assuming all this gets figured out?
You don't want to
That's what
extend
you're-
through September 30th?
I kind of want to see if anybody uses this first.
Yeah, I feel like we could probably extend it the following year and make it more frequent. Art, did you have a question on this?
Thanks, Art Gasparo. I just wanted to mention that this is something from an airport connectivity perspective that I've been hoping to see for some time. The increased frequency may help with the ridership. And then with the more carriers, the larger carriers, I know you hit on it quickly, but I just thought I would mention that, it could really be that sort of transmodal, type of thing that we've been hoping for. And I really think that getting to that kind of a 20-minute cycle is something that is more likely to be used, right, as the people get off. Everyone has a tendency, they may say, okay, we'll pay for an Uber or cab, but when there's only so many available, and then if the buses are available and they happen to be going to the inns or in the town. So I do think this is a good thing. Also, the Airport Commission, I'm not speaking for the commission, I'm a commissioner, had a public hearing last night on rates and charges. And I brought up a suggestion that was adopted unanimously by the commission, that to try to add into the rates and charges a discount to be determined for the parking rate if we can figure out a way to know that it was for a nerd or user. I don't know the exact mechanisms of that, but at least since we had it last night and it was adopted, it's in there, sort of a to be determined. We have to make sure, obviously, that someone's getting on a nerder and not going to New York. But if there's a way, I think that it's a real positive. And then finally, I guess I would just say that I do hope that something is still being looked at for the park and ride. I understand wanting a commuter lot, and that the more you charge, people are less likely to get out of their cars. They're just going to go. But hopefully with the increased parking enforcement, it becomes a disincentive to park downtown. But the free lot at continued at two fairgrounds that's getting used by off-island contractors primarily that are getting free parking on Nantucket and now getting a free ride to and from. I think that needs to really be factored in, that the, I know we're trying to balance traffic and congestion, but I do hope looking forward that we could figure out how to make that also somewhat of a paid lot and then recoup these costs and not just have it be ultimately taxpayer subsidized to, a large user group that are just coming and going from the island. So thank you.
Yeah, we have been discussing permits for the commercial vehicles in the lot.
Yeah, I don't know if we've gotten totally clear direction from the board that we want to charge for commercial vehicles at that lot. But we could develop some kind of what a varying amounts of fees could look like.
I think we should probably
I think we should
talk
be talking
it.
about it. I don't think, if you look at that lot, lot's not that big. And I think we're gonna fill it up pretty quickly. And when you fill it up is when you wanna start or right before you fill it up is when you wanna start putting the charges on. So.
Yeah, I don't, there's that, but also, is Art still here? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, there had been some discussion with the airport management, over the last, I don't know, couple of years about a charge at this lot for commercial, and perhaps if that's, I mean, depending on the charges, maybe it encourages them to go park at the airport, which I think was welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, that parking lot is an underutilized resource for the town. The airport is the town, and there's a complete setup there for capturing that revenue. The new parking system's working well. It's going to be going out for another RFP, I believe, fairly soon. But the first contract that we did for that, there's no gates anymore. It's quite user friendly, and now that the increased bus, it gives the opportunity, and hopefully with everything you've been working on for the parking downtown, I think it really could work well.
We could also think about, I'm not really proposing this, but I'm just commenting on it because it's come up a little bit during some conversations. No commercial parking at the two fairgrounds lot.
And with the airport as an option, so you're not taking away. It's not that they don't have an option. And the airport is quite reasonable, I think. Monthly and yearly options. It's not just per night. So for some of these contractors, it's as long as they have somewhere free to go, they're never going to go there.
Right, exactly, and I think Matt's right that it's not a giant lot. Even with some brush clearing, it's not that big. And if we really want people to park there, it needs to be easy. They need to be able to find a spot. And there are a lot of commercial vehicles that park in there.
Well, there's a lot that park in the Stop and Shop downtown now, and they don't move.
Yeah.
There's 5 or 6 spaces that turn over for shoppers on weekends sometimes, and the rest are all cars parked all weekend. I think that's the biggest problem we have, but.
Yeah, the problem there is it's privately owned. So where are we? Do we want to try the Memorial Day to Labor Day?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think we also have to, option 3. Just to clarify, I think when we first set out on looking into this, we had wanted a free shuttle, and that this will not be free. It'll be the typical Nantucket cost of $1.50.
And I'm going to relook at that now that you're, and I'll come back when we have the local assessment thing figured out at the same time. Because if the stop's going to be at Amelia, that's not within our normal, what our normal fare structure rate is. And I can see it becoming issues. So let me think that process through now that I know that and come back to you with that. There will be a fare. I'm just not sure what it would be with our fare structure.
Okay.
It would be a $3, but.
Well, this is proposed to stop at 10 a.m. if the regular buses go till midnight, right?
Only part of the season.
But just in the summer. In the summer. I'm talking about the summer.
The high summer, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So if you did get off at 10:30, you wouldn't be able to use this new service, but you could jump on, I always forget, Mid-Ion or My Comment.
My Comment or
which
Old
stops
South.
right here.
Yep.
Right,
And they
so
both run until midnight.
There is one option at least to get here.
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, one more question. For 1 month from May 26th to July 1st, it's 102,000. And then July and August is 104,000. It seems like 1 month.
Because you're only paying, the airport's running during those times, so it's already being paid and funded from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., so it's only those outside
In
hours.
July and August.
Right.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
And through Labor Day.
Do we want to do a motion?
I'll make a motion to move forward with option 3 while also exploring how to do this more next season, if we have to start the procurement process now.
Yeah,
For
I'll
2021.
be following up on that in the next couple
Okay,
of weeks.
and you'll
so
get
I'll
back
have
to
a
us with
better answer.
more
on that.
finalized financials.
And then the local assessment thing, right?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, are you guys meeting the February vacation week?
No.
So the week after that?
Yeah, first week of March.
Okay, yeah, I'm not here next week, so, okay.
What are we doing then?
I can come back the first Wednesday in March.
Okay, but what's the action item?
Option 3,
No, I mean, what are you going to do on March 1st, 4th?
the fair rate, local assessment issue, and update on the procurement process and when we can get more frequency.
Okay, got it.
And what date's that, Libby?
It's March 4th.
Okay.
Yep. So one last thing, Madam Chair. I think I missed what DPW Director Rob said. Coming towards the airport, that part was okay or doable. I just don't remember what you said.
I mean, we
That
could
was-
meet too and then update.
Yeah, that sounded like
the
it.
We can
stops
update
as
that in
well.
March too.
Fantastic.
Okay. Sorry. I just couldn't remember what you said.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn the NRTA
Motion to
portion?
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned from
You have to talk
ourselves.
about your buses at the end then.
I forgot.
And citizen departmental requests, sewer department request for a waiver of the town noise bylaw for a number of sewer replacement projects, Bathing Beach Road, Walsh Street, and Race Court. Hello, David.
Good evening, everyone, and I'll admit publicly that I'm the one painting the town green, as you can see by my shoes, for all the pole markouts and everything that National Grid's doing. So that's all of our work that we're just marking out our mains. What we're looking for is for the sewer project on Bathing Beach and specifically Wall Street with between Henry and East Lincoln is for dewatering equipment. There'll be, in the past projects, they've had those large diesel pumps down there that are ultra quiet. However, they will have to run all night and probably for multiple days so we can get down into the, get rid of the water before we do our sewer work. And occasionally, if we have to do any night work, there'll be a light tower that might have an engine running for a couple hours, but it's primarily for the dewatering equipment. Nothing on Ray's Court. It's just the Bathing Beach, Walsh, but I threw Ray's Court in case we needed lights.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next, Nantucket Preservation Trust request for approval of execution of the preservation restriction to be held by Nantucket Preservation Trust for the American Legion, located at 21 Washington Street. Ken?
Good evening. This is a historic preservation easement that relates to the American Legion on Washington Street. The Community Preservation Committee provided funding to restore the exterior and portions of the interior of the American Legion. And part of the restrictions of the grant from the CPC is that a historical preservation easement be put in place and also that the property be made available to the public. And so this particular easement has been approved by the Mass Historical Commission up in Boston, and the town needs to approve it, that it's in the public interest of the town to have preserved this building and to therefore then enter into the approval of the easement. This has been reviewed by town council, and town council has said it is appropriate for us, for the select board to do. So I recommend that we go forward and approve the historic preservation easement and have it executed by the select board.
I think this is great, but what does this easement prevent doing?
Well, what it does is, it's designed to preserve the exterior, the brickwork, the footprint of the building, and so it makes sure that the historical character of the building is preserved. And what was done as part of the award was that the appropriate historical tools were used in terms of the restoration of the brickwork and the fillings in terms of the exterior brick.
So 20 years from now, if they want to put a window in that front part, they either can't do it or they have to go through this.
They would have to go through the process of indicating why it should be done and whether or not historically it be accurate to get approval. So that's the object of the easement restriction. The Preservation Trust makes sure that the building stays appropriate in terms of the condition of the building.
This is something we do on all of the CPC.
Well, on all of the CPC, there is a restriction depending on the nature of the grant with respect to whether it's for preservation or for open space or the other things.
I think it's great. I'm just curious on the details of how how hard armored is it that somebody can't do something down 30 years from now down the road.
Yeah. Well, you have to ask permission. Some things they won't let you do. And if you looked in it, some of it that was interesting is sort of the cementish stuff on the side. They're sort of saying over time they'd like to see that go away. That's recent, not permanent. It looked like that's something.
But what happened is that when there was a restoration done earlier on, they used the wrong kind of cement. They used Portland cement, which in fact does not work very well here in this environment. And so basically what you have to do is to go back to the historical approach with respect to the cement that you use in terms of making it work properly.
Right. And there also was comments about steel being rusted and damaged, whereas the old stuff, the way they used to do it with the mortar and things lasted, and the steel that they put in the 60s or 70s isn't working. So it's, some of it is smart. Like what they're talking about is stuff that's lasted 250 years. Why would you change,
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next thing is something that has not come before the select board before, and that's the town is being asked to hold a conservation restriction for the Hawthorne Park open space as a result of the planning board's flex development special permit approval with respect to that property. A couple of years ago, the planning board introduced a new concept in the development of multi-dwelling parcels for open space called Flex Development Plan, which replaced the cluster subdivision provisions in the bylaw. And this is the first of two subdivisions that have been set up under that new Flex Development Plan. And what the bylaw required was that you get a conservation restriction that was monitored by an organization that, in fact, looks after monitoring these deed restrictions. And they've gone out and they've not been able to get any of the organizations that normally hold these restrictions to be able to hold it. So they have come to the town and asked whether or not the town would be prepared to hold the restriction in order to be able to fulfill the requirements under the town's bylaw under the Flex Development Special Permit. We have talked to town council, and town council has indicated that the select board does have the authority to hold it, and that the select board also has the authority to delegate the administration of it to an administrative body with it, such as PLUS, who in fact originally issues the award with respect to the plan. So what we've done is taken a look. Town council has reviewed it, has given us the opinion, and they indicate that A, the select board can hold it should they choose to do so. B, they have the authority to delegate it to an administrative body to enforce it. Now, what's really important is, and this is what I think is very important for you to understand, is that their permit requires that there is a homeowners association that is funded, and it itself has the obligation to oversee the conservation restriction relative to the open space in the property. So, in fact, there is an entity that is a part of the homeowners association that has deeded title and has a responsibility to enforce it. So what the town's role would be is to oversee that what they're doing is correct within the terms of the restriction. So, as I said, town council has indicated that you can if you choose to, and if you choose to, you can delegate it. Town council has also suggested that in view of the fact that it has become impossible to find any other organization to hold the restrictions, that you instruct the planning board to go back and change the bylaw in order to be able to, that can be done by changing the bylaw. I've spoken with Andrew, and he said it is a relatively easy fix in order to be able to change the bylaw to provide a different means of enforcement as opposed to what is in place under the existing flex development plan. So it would be my recommendation to you that you choose to accept and monitor the easement, that you then delegate it as you see fit, and that you then also instruct the planning board to, in fact, come up with a change to a new bylaw to be able to figure out how to deal with this in a different manner than in terms of requiring the conservation restriction being monitored by the town.
I have a question. What are the restrictions do the select board hold now, and who have they delegated them to?
Of this kind of restriction, I'm not aware of any that the select board holds now.
All right.
So,
yeah.
This concept of the delegation is something that I experienced in my business activity relative to a number of real estate clients where there have been developments, and there's been a homeowners association, and this process has worked well with respect to some of the organizations that do hold these charitable restrictions.
Yeah, I don't think we should be, there was a change of the bylaw after this was issued to say that they have to find someone to hold it prior to the planning board issuing this. So this is maybe one or two are going to be entered like this.
There's only two that
There are two
would
going to be
be like
entered,
this, yeah.
and I'm adamantly opposed to the town holding them. I think that is a poor process. I couldn't put my name to there's a draft in here of a conservation restriction. I couldn't put my name to this. It's saying that it's going to do things that I don't believe it's going to do. Open space protection, floodplain, soils, wildlife. This is a parking lot and the reason that the other entities are not holding this is because it doesn't meet their standards. And so it would be a huge mistake for the town to get into taking conservation restrictions that don't meet the standard that they should meet or even come close. And I think it would end up being, what it would do is it would take leverage away from the conservation entities to have the right things done, and it would make the town the holder of last resort of these things. So when you did something that didn't really, have much, I just think it's a really bad idea, and I think it would be giving town more responsibility and more work that we don't enforce things very well as it is. So I just am adamantly against us holding it. If they want to put it on, like the lawyer talked about, maybe they could put it on their deed and do it some other way. They should do it some other way. I just don't think that we should be involved with this. I think it's setting a really bad precedent. It's just, and so anyway.
So I think it is a bad precedent, but it's only one because the bylaw a couple of years ago that Land Council did. Well, this won't be happening again. My question for Ken or for anybody, so let's say we go forward with this. We either have to enforce it and monitor it ourselves. So who would do that? And if we give it to an administrative body.
Well, the thought was
hold on. Just let me get my thought through.
Yeah.
Then that would be the homeowners association. So we're kind of giving it back to the entity. And then we have to monitor them. So just who would be?
The homeowners association has the principal responsibility, and the thought process would be to have Plus monitor it in view of the fact that they had issued the permit in the first place. So that that would be part of the monitoring of the permit that they
So
issued.
it'd be plus.
Yeah,
So it'd be
yeah.
building inspectors or
Zoning enforcement,
Zoning enforcement.
like how they monitor special permits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does enforcement monitoring mean? Is it you kind of walk through once a year? I just kind of know what I'm getting
Well,
into.
that in terms of my experience with the other things, a couple of organizations, it's been a once a year that the person walks through, takes a look at it, and then sends a note back to the homeowners association saying, we've reviewed it and we're satisfied that you comply with the terms of the conservation restriction.
You know, they don't comply. Is it litigation? Like what?
No, it then becomes the homeowners association obligation to be able to fix what is supposed to be done. Because the homeowners association, under this documentation, has the principal responsibility for maintaining the terms of the restriction.
So then you're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of different owners, all own a portion of it. It's going to change as they sell, and there's going to be different ideas of what they want to do there. I don't think the town is set up to enforce this. I think it's not we just shouldn't be. It's just one of those, we just absolutely should not be doing this. Period. And I just don't understand. You know, and we understand we made a mistake, in my opinion. Okay, it should have been figured this out before. If we were saying this is lowlands and it's all going to be wetlands, and someday this is where the resiliency
It wouldn't have came to us if that's.
Well, no, but if that's what they were bringing to us, sure, but that isn't what this is, and
But
so
it wouldn't come to us because someone else would have grabbed it, right?
understood. But if we accept this, there'll be more of this. There'll be more. There's more incentive for people to do this. We're talking about a bylaw change so we can hold more of them. We don't want to hold any of them.
The object of the exercise is to change the bylaw so that you get out of this, so that there be that you would remove this restriction, figure out a different way through the bylaw to be able to enforce what needs to be done under the permit. And in discussions with Andrew, he said that would be relatively straightforward and easy to do. And I've only been aware of two particular projects, this one and then one other that Sarah will be able to address.
I just wanted to address a couple of comments. Sarah Alger, I represent Hawthorne Park LLC. The principals, unfortunately, weren't able to be here tonight. Just in terms of enforcement, under the old cluster subdivision bylaw, there was open space, just as there is here. It's owned by the homeowners associations, and those homeowners associations enforce the restrictions just as they will here.
Could you give examples of that just for everyone?
There's the Aurora subdivision, which is like right across the street. Blueberry Pasture, Finback, Wright's Landing, Nantucket Preserve, Sconset Hydrangea, which is right off the Milestone Road.
So none of those are held by an organization. They're all
held by the
homeowner
Homeowners
enforced.
Association. This was before the conservation restriction requirement was put in.
She said Sconset Hydrangea,
Sconset
Sconset Trust, but
No, Sconset Hydrangea, I don't think.
Sconset Trust worked out a deal with the hydrangea group that they own the back part.
They own the back part, but they don't, I don't think they
manage the open space there, but they
don't.
purchased a large portion of it.
They purchased a portion of it. But Aurora, Blueberry Pasture, Finback, Tetakimo, Wright's Landing, Nantucket, those all or cluster subdivisions that have open space that are held by the homeowners association.
so this only came into play with the change from cluster to
When the
flex.
cluster was eliminated and the flex subdivision provision came into effect. And I just want to mention the benefit of the cluster subdivision. Let's remember, this was a junkyard. It was filled with old cars that had all been buried there, full of all kinds of hideous stuff. It was all dug out, made beautiful. There could have been, by right, 15 A&R lots with no approval process, no restrictions at all, just A&R, just as of right. A total of 45 dwellings, 15 primary, 15 secondary, and 15 tertiaries. Instead, there's a bonus for doing flex development. So there are 17 lots with a limit of 17 houses. There's an open space requirement, which is what this is. It's like 145,000 square feet. It's all open. There's a provision in the flex bylaw that allows passive recreation with attendant structures. So there's a building envelope that has a small structure and a pool in it. Someone, I think, mentioned that this is a parking lot. This is not a parking lot. There's acres of open land here. There's, I think, 8 parking spaces and a community driveway. So there is a benefit to the flex development. We've eliminated a significant number of homes. The homeowners association will enforce it. I completely understand why you don't want to hold it. The reason for the other entities not wanting to hold it were various. Most of the organizations don't hold preservation. They don't want to hold things on Nantucket because they don't want to have to come here and do the enforcement. So,
Sarah, it's on the map. Which is the open space here? Which is
okay.
We've put it up just so the public can see.
Okay, so
It's all in the middle.
It's all of that.
And that up there.
That whole, yeah.
And why couldn't the homeowner association hold it?
They are holding it, but the bylaw requires that in addition to the homeowners association holding it, we have to subject it to a conservation restriction.
And the homeowners association has to enforce it.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So there's a homeowners association that will own all of this land, and it will be subject to this conservation restriction. It's the state form. I didn't do much to it, but.
I mean, I think I like the design. I know why they did it. But it doesn't hit me as cluster. It doesn't seem like, sort of on the way out to Matic on the right, the first cluster subdivision. What is it called? Henry and Judy live there. Fisher's Landing. Fisher's Landing was one of the first in the whole United States. And what they didn't make all the green space in the middle of the homes. They made the green space on the outlying areas next to the wetlands, et cetera. I mean, I think that was the intent of it. I think for a lot of different reasons, we can read it in our packet. The other entities weren't willing to hold it, and I just, I just don't think we should. And so, and I like what they've done. I think they've done a great job, and I think it's a huge improvement. I'm not arguing that at all.
No, I know. I mean, but they followed all I can tell you is the bylaw existed, they followed the bylaw, they went through the permitting process, they got the permit from the planning board, they've made, I think, extraordinary efforts to try to find someone to hold this conservation restriction, and we can't find anyone to hold it.
I mean, it kind of seems to me that it gives us an extra layer over any of the cluster developments that were done prior.
Yeah, it is.
This is now both the homeowners association are holding it, and the town gets extra ability to enforce
Oversight.
it if that comes up.
Right.
I don't know. It just
Right, because in the other cluster subdivisions, if people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, you're reliant solely upon the homeowners association.
And I mean, I guess the planning board could come in and try and enforce their original
decision.
Permit.
Correct.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But this just is kind of like an extra.
And this is it's permanent.
Permanent rather than expiring.
Right.
And if we voted not to do this, then they would write it in the deed and move on. There's nothing.
What? Sarah, I didn't.
No, they're stuck without a town meeting change.
No, I
to
think
the bylaw,
what happens
right?
under our permit, if we fail to find someone to hold it, like if you fail to find it, we have to go back to the planning board and ask them to make a finding that we've sought a holder in good faith and with all due diligence. And if they find that we've done that, they can waive the requirement.
I thought you also got an extra lot if you couldn't do it.
No, we've already gotten the bonus lots that we're getting. We got the bonus lots that we're getting. The lots are over.
Okay,
so we're locked into this.
So if the board's uncomfortable agreeing to have the town hold it with planning board enforcing it, you go back to the planning board and say, we couldn't find anyone to sign on to this. And then they waive it,
They would
essentially.
They would have to waive the requirement, and then we'd be like any other cluster subdivision.
Right. So which seems better, the extra layer or going back to what the bylaw was before, essentially?
You know how I feel. I think it should go back. They could have had the conservation restriction required first and done it that way, and we wouldn't even be here. And there would be other things put on this, I'm sure. Then it would have been slightly different. I've done a really nice job, but there would have been some negotiations. Maybe the pool and the house would be tucked in a corner and it would be open space, or it would be in a different area. Something would happen, but I just think we shouldn't, I just don't think we should add another thing to town's plate to follow and to hear complaints about in 5 or 10 years. If the planning board wants to get rid of it, they can get rid of it. And I don't see that this is going to change much if they get rid of it. It's not. All of this is brand new plantings. It's not, it's going to look beautiful, but it's not a wetland. It's not it's not critical habitat. It's not any of those things. It's a subdivision, and it's fine. It's going to be beautiful, but I don't see that. I don't think that there's any advantage to us. So we're going to go in and check what types of grasses and what animals are growing there and do all the things that a conservation restriction usually does. I don't think so.
I just don't understand what the disadvantage is. How is it harming the town? That's my question.
Adding another layer of oversight, adding more stuff for staff to do or get complaints about, setting a bad precedent, maybe giving the idea that this is how all of them should be because we can get to the town to hold them. I just think that as a policy, we should not hold conservation restrictions. Conservation entities should hold them.
I will say too that most of the conservation restriction, or most of the holders of them, they have procedures in place. They have staff that's, are kind of proper stewards, and they understand what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it. And we don't currently have something like that in place.
And there's a lot to it. You got a big long list of things. I'm trying to do it myself. I'm trying to donate land, and you got a big long list of things you have to comply with to do it. There's a lot to it.
I think there's another avenue to get this done through the planning board, and it's a conservation restriction with no conservation value. Nobody wanted it, right? So Sarah's here just doing due diligence, doing your job, trying to have somebody to hold it. There's no conservation value. So I think it's okay either way because there's nothing.
How is there no value?
I think there's conservation value. There's 144,000 square feet that isn't built on.
I mean, say every one of these homeowners starts encroaching into the open space.
Right.
And they all kind of agree to turn a blind eye. Now there's no real ability to come in and say something. Right?
You'd have to get the planning board, you'd have to do what you would do anyway, go to the planning board, file a complaint, and have zoning enforcement enforce the special permit.
But now, if we did this, we could just go enforce it without having to go to a planning board hearing on it.
Correct.
So
Raise your hands if you want to start being in the enforcing the planning board's rules.
We wouldn't. The planning board would.
We're talking about two particular instances.
I understand,
with respect to this, as opposed to this being suddenly having hundreds of them. So that's the issue.
I understand.
It doesn't matter. I mean, I think either way. I mean, we're giving up something by not doing it. But we have a zoning enforcement officer.
Right. And it gives the town
But-
an oversight over something that is relatively easy to be able to monitor because of the fact that there is a homeowners association in place that has to do this, has the principal responsibility for it.
Well, if we don't do it, there's no oversight. So, right. That's pretty much what
If
you're saying.
if we don't do it, it's the homeowners association, and
There's no incentive.
they would monitor themselves, and someone would have to file a complaint to the planning board.
And so
So,
they
I
would-
mean, in a way, it's going to end up somewhat working the same, but this just makes it a little bit cleaner in my mind of the ability for the town to enforce.
So it would work just the way the cluster development was working previously. So why did they change the bylaw to put this restriction in? Like, what was the intent of changing the bylaw?
I don't know the answer to that. Unfortunately, Andrew had to leave.
I believe the reason for doing it was the increased enforcement that the conservation restriction provides in addition to just the homeowners association.
I think it's a huge red flag that nobody else wanted it and then it gets stuck back on the town. But I also understand that this is kind of a one-off in the sense that we've now changed the bylaw. It shouldn't be coming back to us. We won't be holding hundreds of them. So
It hasn't been changed yet.
I thought we've only had two go through.
Yeah.
Two things have changed, though. One thing has already changed. There's now a provision in the bylaw that says before you can even get your approval, you have to have a holder. So
it won't come back to the town
This won't
anymore.
happen again.
And I think that's a really important
good,
time.
That's a really good thing to
Yeah.
have changed. Like that's
Because
what
the
it should have
land
been.
council wrote that they had rejected it, but if they had been part of the process, might have had a different outcome and part of the design process.
They were part of the process, though. The land council didn't want to hold this from the beginning.
Okay.
We talked to them. They came to the planning board. It was part of the hearing process.
Maybe it was one of the other organizations. I just saw if they'd been a part of it, they might have approved it.
Yeah.
So I like that that's been changed.
Or if it had more of the changes they envisioned, they would have been part of it. So that's
Right.
Let's see where we're at. Move to approve the request.
Is there a second?
Okay. Another motion.
move to deny.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
I am. It's 2-2.
So we take it up when Rita comes back, or?
No, it fails.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, the denial failed. So what does that mean?
It means you didn't agree
No.
to hold it.
You didn't agree to hold it, so I can either come back with a second request when you have a five-person board, or I can go back to the planning board. So,
I would say probably go back to the planning board at this stage.
I would say too.
okay,
Because, I mean, the request has failed, so it just seems like that will be the cleaner path.
right. Alrighty, that's what I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next. We have a public hearing. Nantucket Sewer Commission, public hearing to consider amendments to the Nantucket Town and Sconset Sewer Districts. David, do you want to present these? I opened the public hearing.
So, good evening again. These are all in your packet. I don't know if you want to go through each single one or if you just had specific questions on some. I tried to get, with the group that we met, I tried to get as detailed as we could with all of these. I don't know if you have any specific questions or.
I would say let's go 82, go one at a time, I would say.
I only have questions on 82 and 84, but if you guys want me to go through all of them.
All right. Yeah. The 82 is the Sconset district map change. This is a lot that is on the map is directly across and directly up gradient of the Wannacomet water right across the street. When we saw this come through as a subdivision, we took and met as a group, and everything around it except for the triangle shape off to the right, and everything to the left, I believe, is all the Sconset Foundation Trust, and most all of the homes that are in the blue that run up along New Street and are around the water company, those properties are all still on septic systems. There is no sewer there right now. There's been proposals and talks with different landowners to try to install sewer in those areas, and we're also working through a sewer master plan and a comprehensive wastewater management plan for Sconset that's going to involve sewering these areas. And as large as this piece of property is, some of it's already in the district. I think there's 4 lots along the front that's part of this whole entire parcel. It just seemed to make sense to include it all, especially with the potential for growth in the area. But this whole area is slated to be sewered in some of the coming plans that we have. So with the fact that it's in a well protection zone, and it met some of the other requirements, we suggested that this be added to the sewer district, again, to protect our well zones.
It's also, I don't know how this got cut off in your report, but this is a town-sponsored article.
Yes, this one is, the town sponsored this one.
Which
Sorry.
means coming from
Coming
you?
from us, is that myself, Andrew, and Roberto, we put this together.
Where did it initiate, though? Well, and I only ask that because if it gets sewered, there's more bedrooms, potentially, right?
It initiated with us seeing the plan come through for the planning board, and we had concerns with some growth in that area. Currently, the subdivision that's just to the left, the Hydrangea Lane system, they have a privately maintained group or a community a sewer system, septic system, that they are struggling to find an operator to maintain that. And they've been struggling for a couple of years to get they have to bring someone in from the mainland to maintain that system. And that was another concern to us, that could we end up with another community system in this area that would struggle to get, because you have to be a licensed wastewater operator to operate these community packages. So it was concerning to us, especially whether it would be an upgradient of the well system.
I noticed on your checklist, it was the only one that got a score of 11. Everything else was like 9 or 8.
Yeah, this is pretty important to what we think for water quality. Mass DEP, Mark's been in touch with them in the past, and these lots all around this area are on a watch list for them, that they're waiting for sewer to come in because it would help with the water protection in that whole area.
Were these lots calculated in 04 or 14 CWMP? Were they counted toward the total?
Both of those CWMPs did not include Sconset.
Right.
And we're currently doing a Sconset CWMP right now.
Right, but when we did, so the CWMT didn't include it, but when we first made the decision on this, it was sort of what's in was in and what's out is out. And the stuff in the needs areas, the stuff that is, is next to ponds and et cetera, those are the ones we should be considering. And a lot of what we were told by the consultants then is a lot of these upland parcels perked really well. That was sort of the understanding, is in certain areas we shouldn't really be encouraging sewer because we don't have the capacity, it's expensive, and a lot of these take care of it themselves.
Yeah, and this being upland, means that the flow flows from this lot towards the wells.
Right.
So anything that would be discharged into the ground flows the direction of the wells in Sconset. Right. This is being added and included in our CWMP currently going on and the master plan. So these flows will be calculated into that. And there's also potential for private individuals in this area to assist with the design, funding, and construction of the sewer in the future.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. It's in a wellhead protection district. We have to be aware that more bedrooms will be most likely put in, right? So ground cover stays the same, right?
It's all, yeah, the zoning is set right now out
Right.
there. And I don't think there's any plans to change any of the zoning. And most of the other land around it is already held by conservation organizations.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we're basically discussing this is gonna be voted at town meeting anyway.
Well, it's a difference though, right? If we
So
say
it's a
no-
2/3 vote or a half vote. So really, if this is such a good idea, if we don't support it, it goes to town meeting, and if it's the best thing ever, it'll get supported. So I just think, we're really just, we're just making the bar slightly higher or not.
Right.
So, I mean, I've heard, sort of both ways. I've heard people say, sure, it's gonna help us with the, it's gonna help us with the groundwater potentially in the flow, but it's also gonna put so much more development. What I've had people conservationists tell me is, we should be changing the zoning here first so we don't get all the hardscaping and all the other stuff we're gonna get. As soon as this happens and depending who pays for this, it's gonna be a lot more developed and there's gonna be more intense use with more likely things going into that system. So, and no one has really studied to know which is which. It's not, sewer itself isn't the, magic bullet. It helps, but there's a lot of other pollutants that are happening that are not a result of, the number of bedrooms. They're a result of all the other stuff, all the hardscaping and the roof runoff and all the other things that are gonna happen. So I'm not gonna die on this hill on this one way or the other, but, I think it's gonna have its discussion at town meeting, and the question, do we wanna make it easier or not?
And I agree with what Matt's saying. It's just because of the past experience we've had with the development next door and not being able to get people to manage. If this was developed, I would assume it would do the same thing. It wouldn't have a whole bunch of different septic systems. It may have one community system. And I don't know what the zoning is out there in the acreage.
I was going to say, I saw the subdivision plan for this, and it looked like it was only getting divided into 3 lots, and they were very much oversized lots. So it doesn't look like they're trying to really maximize the existing zoning, which I want to say might be half acre right there.
I think it's SR20.
That's half acre.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like 2 40,000 square foot lots and one that's almost, 3 acres, maybe 2 acres. So they're not trying, it doesn't seem like they're trying to maximize the buildability there. I mean, you could have estate lots, but it's not going to be, 17 lots on 5 acres or something.
Yeah, but plans can change and subdivisions can happen, next year or 10 years from now. I mean, so that, it is what it is.
Sewer will come to this area in the future, not necessarily to this lot, moving this one forward, but that whole area will become sewered because all of New Street and everything, they're still all in septic systems.
I think we should sewer this. I think it was brought forward by the town and we should support it.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. We're in the middle of a
sorry,
public
yeah.
hearing. Can we hold that until
Yeah.
the end? Let's just go through them.
Okay. The next one is 83, which is 154R Cliff Road. From what Andrew has been told, and we have all understood, that this article has been pulled by the proponent. However, it is adjacent to that I can't remember the name. I can't even see what it says there.
Hickory Meadow.
Hickory Meadow, which is which is all sewered by a low pressure sewer system. And if this one was to go forward, one of the requirements that they would have to do would be similar to a lot of the other ones. They would have to completely assess the existing system, and if it's too small, they would have to rebuild it or increase the size. This lot I don't believe has frontage access to Hickory Meadow. There's a driveway that comes way off of Cliff Road.
Yeah, it's an easement through another property.
So this was just an unusual lot, but I believe it was pulled, so.
No, I don't see any reason to And you're recommending nothing for that, right?
No, because of that, we were told it
Yes,
was.
I follow that.
Next one is 18 Kimball Ave. This is one of the last larger parcels up in that area. It does abut a existing sewer line that's in the road. However, this parcel would have to take in, it was installed privately. That was a privately installed force main. So one of the requirements that we would do with this article would be to mandate again that the parcel owner do a complete assessment of the existing force main system that's there, and if it's inadequate after submitting a report, they would have to bring it up to current standards.
When you do that, are you telling them how much now and in the future it may pick up? Are you telling them which properties and?
They have to take into an assessment of the area. We kind of give them a radius. I know that there's other parcels towards McKinley and everything going out that have asked to be put in the sewer district. The town has no current or upcoming plans to extend sewer beyond Pilgrim Road. Right now, the sewer stops at Pilgrim Road on the other side, on the Cliff Road side. But as you can see, a lot of those are already in the district. There's no sewer services to those areas except through Paul Jones. So this one up on Kimball goes over to a manhole up on Sherburne Turnpike that was installed by one of those parcels on the harbor side. And I can't remember the zoning as well. Up there is pretty large in this one zone. But it already is adjacent to a sewer. So this is why we had brought the recommendations as we have listed.
Question. It's not in a needs area.
Correct, it is not in the needs area.
So why does it need to be in the sewer district?
It met a lot of the other requirements on the criteria.
But it didn't meet 9.
The
I only got 7, and our policy is must equal
It
or
must be
exceed
9 or further. So we took in Andrew, and we're talking with Roberto and Andrew on this one. There was a specific reason, and I know Andrew left for this one.
I mean, I get the recommendation here, but it didn't meet our own number.
Yeah, it didn't quite meet the total number, but it was just that they're already existing along the existing sewer line.
We have to be careful because under that criteria, it's close to sewer. Eventually, everything's going to be, if we keep hopscotching, everything is going to be close to sewer, and we're going to sue the whole island.
It's directly adjacent, and the lot.
No, I understand, but if you follow that logic, we'll extend it there, and then someone's going to be adjacent to that lot. So we'll extend it again, and then someone else will be adjacent, and we'll extend it again. And so eventually, we sewer a bunch of places that, if we use that logic, we sewer a lot of places that we maybe don't have the capacity for, or we don't have the money for. So we really, part of why we did this checklist is to make the bar a little bit higher. So in this case, the first one and this one, I would say I'd like to keep it 2/3. The other one is fine, But we were doing that for a specific reason. And there was a lot of concern when all this happened 20 years ago about how are we going to pay for the gallonage and the existing plant, and then enlarging the plants and enlarging them again. And, so it really.
You said the first one and this one.
82, you guys were voting in favor. We haven't voted yet.
Yeah.
But I'm against that one.
But which one were you okay with? Because 83 got pulled.
Yeah, I'm okay with 83. The recommendation on 83, I'd say follow.
The recommendation to pull it.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So none of them are okay so far.
Well, no, I'm okay with the recommendation on 83. I'm not okay with 82, and I'm not okay with 84. I'd like them to go and get a 2/3 vote, not a 1/2 vote. I'm not saying so. I'd like them to make that argument, on town meeting floor.
Okay. Did you have something to say, Art? It's a public hearing.
Yes, Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering. I work for the owners, and I just got this checklist today, and there is, under septic system criteria, it's not marked off, but I can tell you firsthand that this system is failed, completely failed. hydraulically. And so in starting to look at a septic repair on this property, I had actually suggested that they should consider, given all of the circumstances, tying into the sewer, because I knew they'd be close. But again, you don't really have a chance to know how the checklist is going to go. And then just getting it now, I see this. So I think that with that checked, it would be 1 shy, so it would be 8 instead of 9. And on this particular property, what I could tell you is that, as Mr. Gray stated, the pipe we tie into is right in front of the house. Instead of, it's a highly vegetated lot. There's about at least 20 feet of grade change. So we would have to come in and, there'd be a lot of brush cutting. There would be a lot of mechanical disturbance and fill. It would be a very, I'm not saying it can't be done, but from current conditions, you could either put a pump in and, not really disturb much of the property and tie into the main that's there, or you could come in and have to, it's significant topography that we really don't see a lot of in a lot of cases. So I do think that, and that was, in fairness, checked off on the checklist. So that was really, how this came about. So just for your consideration, that's part of it.
Okay, on to 85, which is 11 milestone crossing. As you can see, similar to a checkerboard there, these other lots have been recently added at prior town meetings. It does fall within the wellhead protection zone. It is adjacent to sewer. Sewer is on Hinsdale. And I think that other lot that has the current cursor on it was also talking about going forward with sewer, but there's only one other lot that's actually adjacent to Hinsdale. Again, this is a wellhead protection zone. This is not necessarily a needs area, but it is in the wellhead zone, protection zone area. 86, which I think everyone's here is familiar with. That's the 1 West Chester Street extension property. This one sits in and almost completely surrounded by a wetland. The soils in that area we know are very bad. I don't believe there's any further potential for any more building on this lot because of the soils and the amount of wetlands in the area. And sewer is just about at the corner of the property already, coming from the backside of the ASPCA there.
This is the parcel that's been under evaluation for the senior center.
This was, for the town.
Just to be clear, this, if we were to go down that path, this would be a necessity.
Is it in a needs area?
It's not in the needs area, it's just in a wellhead. I mean, it's in a wetland area and a priority habitat.
And conservation restriction, building envelope isn't going to increase. This is
one that's...
This is a no-brainer. This one ticks a lot of boxes, even if it doesn't get the right number.
This one's landlocked about where it sits.
Yeah.
Moving on to Article 87. It's the Hummock Pond Road, Millbrook Road area. This parcel is in the needs area. It's in the Hummock Pond Watershed Protection Zone B. It's adjacent already to sewer district. It has the one area, it doesn't really show it. There are some very bad soils in this area. It's very wet in that back corner. And we're talking with Andrew. This is very limited. There's a very limited building envelope that will be, and I believe it's along the backside of where that one structure you see that's like rectangle shape. That's about the only lot that they said there would be building on at all, which is behind the Bell's property and the other people along Hummock Pond Road. This did take and have a lot of the check boxes. There is an existing force main up to just about the corner of the property already that's been moved through. This is in a needs area, and it's one of our high priority areas for looking at sewer and extending sewer and coming out of the master plan. Because
What
this
would be built here?
Sorry?
What would be being built here? Right, so what would they build?
This is a recent acquisition by the land bank, and the Larrabees, Nick and Tom, have life rights to farm the property, and there is where David just described the building envelope. The building envelope has been created, or reserved residential rights. There's going to be a primary home, a small cottage for one of them, and the house out on the street is coming down. It'll come down before the summer, and that's it.
And I think they can have a farm stand as well.
There is going to be a farm stand. Pardon me, you're right. And as part of that, there will probably be public restroom facilities, right, in the end of that farm stand, which is pretty much right where the house is now.
Okay.
On the road, setback. But beyond that, that's it.
Thank you.
Again, I have to ask Carl if I could just add to that as well. Having worked on this property fairly extensively, the wetlands and the soils very much, lend themselves to sewer over septic.
Okay.
Thank you, Art. Bill? And then the next
88.
one. Next one is 88. This one's one that we encourage discussion more from the board. This one does sit within a wetland. The needs areas. It's within the MyComet needs areas. It's currently not adjacent to any sewers. However, they would have the ability to extend sewer. And again, they would have to take and provide assessments and everything on what's going on. They would have to cross right about where the red line is that separates the lot, is where the two towns' force mains run currently in that easement that's there. So they would have to do construction and cross those two force mains, come all the way down to South Shore Road, and then they would have to take a left on South Shore and then sewer all the way down to Sherburne Turnpike. They would have the ability to get to the sewer. It would be a bit of a stretch. These lots are very currently quite large. I believe the soils, it's in the needs area, but I believe the soils in some of these lots are so big that they would have the ability. And the group, when we met, as you can see with the explanation that we had, there's potentially other infrastructure coming down this road, down South Shore Road at some time, possibly in the future, which could then have stubs left off for this area for sewer in the future. But it's just one that we wanted to have more discussion on. This one was just an unusual request, being so far off the path that it is now.
Where was the request coming from? From the homeowners in the area?
This was from the homeowners in the area.
The sponsor of the article is Linda Williams.
So it had a lot of the check boxes. It's in a needs area, but it would be a fairly complicated area to sewer currently with existing infrastructure. It is already in the calculations based off the 2014 CWMP, so these lots are already calculated. So this is not an additional flow. It's just when they started to do a lot of the adding of the sewer district in the South Shore Road area, it seems like they skipped a bunch of lots, added some lots, and skipped some. We had the same issue over on Folger and Field, where a lot of those areas are all in the needs areas already in the sewer district and are expanding as we speak now. So again, it is a lot that could be sewered, but it would be a challenge, and we just wanted to have more discussion here about it.
But you're recommending to add it?
We are, because it's in the needs area. It's pretty much an automatic in.
Right. And I this will be the other one that I'll be I'm opposed to. I think that this should wait till we have planned out the sewer and have come down the street, rather than start doing it piecemeal. But
That's about all I really had. I don't know if there any further questions or looking at the maps.
my only other comment, sorry, is just in general, I want to make sure, because you say, well, we're going to have their engineer do this, and we're going to have their engineer do that, and we're going to have them spec this and do that. I just want to make sure that, that you guys are doing a really good job of looking that they're picking the right area, that they're doing the right math. I just want to make sure there's someone checking over their shoulder, because I worry that, some of the engineering is what's gotten us into the situations or that you're fixing. Yeah. So, are you, like, when you've written it as, we'll have them do this and we'll have them do that, I think you should be telling them what we want, myself.
Well, we do, and I know Art can attest to some of it because he's had some extensions in the past that we are very thorough in the review. There's a lot of requirements now where if someone does a sewer extension, we just don't let them run a main anymore. We mandate that they leave stubs at each lot as they go by, so that you don't have to go and dig up the road again. The stub's already at the property line. We have an engineer in-house. We also have resources outside that we can take and look at any of the bigger plans that we have. But I think, as you know, I'm pretty much watching over everyone's shoulder as it is, so.
No, but I want to make sure, A, for the camera, and B, for the minutes, that, that we aren't slowly giving that responsibility over to, I want to make sure that we're taking it, and if we want a 6-inch instead of a 4-inch, I want to make sure if we need a 6-inch, let's do a 6-inch. I just, there's been a lot, I say it every time we talk about this,
and again,
because I've been involved long enough to see us not.
I think Art could attest that we are pretty thorough, and I mean, we do mandate a lot more stuff now than was. We're actually enforcing the regulations that have been in effect for a long time, and we get our pushback, but, it's, example, you're talking 4 and 6 inch. We don't allow 4-inch in the streets anymore. We want 6-inch to the lots. So, so you don't have to keep digging up the road. So there is a lot more oversight than.
Right, and if we're catching a lot of potential new homes and a potential growth, we need, maybe it's not 6-inch, maybe it's 8 or 12, whatever. I just think that has to really be, sort of front and center. So we're only doing this thing once.
And luckily, the sewer master plan is going to be presented to you in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure exactly when. And I think you're going to find out that that's extremely thorough, and it's calling out exactly what you're calling out. What potential flows could be coming from these areas. Now, we're increasing Vesper Lane. Originally was an 8-inch main. We made it to 12 to be able to take all of Hummock Pond. We're doing a project now coming up on Surfside. That's going to be 15-inch to take future flows. So we are definitely looking down the road now, and our consultants have been extremely thorough in all the meetings we've had. So we are looking ahead at everything. So we're trying our best to take into it. We have crews out there every day that are coming across people that are, doing excavations before they call for an inspection or whatever. So we're out there.
You caught me. Darn.
Oh, we hear that. I know. And one of the other things, just to throw it in a little bit more, is a lot of the projects now, you have to have an as-built submitted in order to get a sign-off on the plan. And I know Art and all the other engineering firms and the land surveyors know that their phone's just ringing off the hook. They're ready for that, come out and, mark everything out and get all for the as-built. So we're getting a lot more data and a lot more information than we ever had before.
It's a public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this before I close the public hearing? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Board discussion or motion?
How do you want to do this? Are we going to vote?
You want to go one by one, or do you have a blanket one you want to do?
I think, because Matt disagrees on some of them, or we might disagree, so I think maybe just do them one by one, we do them quick.
Okay.
I'll approve, 82 I will approve to amend.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
No.
opposed? 3-1. 83. Is
Do we have to do anything for that?
It's being pulled. I move approval of. All right.
yeah, someone could call it.
Well, but they're recommending not to, you guys are recommending not to move forward, so, I support them not moving forward on it. Making it a 2/3 vote. If it doesn't get pulled, it'll be 2/3.
So we're not supporting 83, basically.
So I'll make the motion to not support 83.
Well, no, their motion on 83 is to,
That's just their recommendation.
I'm accepting their recommendation. Okay.
All those in favor?
I'm making the motion to accept the recommendation. Not to support, yeah.
And who seconded it again?
Jason.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Article 84.
Motion to not support, not recommend.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm opposed.
Opposed to the motion.
Yeah. 85.
Move approval of their motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Move approval of 86.
I'm actually opposed to 85. I'm opposed to 85. I think it's too piecemeal. Okay, 86. You say move approval?
Move approval of the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously on that one. 87.
Move approval of their motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Article 88.
I don't support it, so. So I'll move to leave it as a 2/3 vote.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
I'm in favor. I think we should discuss it and get a 2/3 for this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was tricky, so.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you, David.
And there's a lot of other things going on that has to have, there's a lot to straighten out down that stretch.
Thank you, everyone, for your support.
Are we ready to get into facilities discussion at 9 o'clock? I don't think we are
I don't
tonight.
know, are we ever going to have a night where we'll have an hour and a half?
Well, I really thought we would have it tonight, but some things took up a lot more time than we were planning on. We may have to do a special workshop on this,
I think a
where
workshop
we
like
really
that.
clear a meeting for it.
We haven't really dug into it.
Yep.
Strategic plan initiative.
So maybe next week we can talk about some dates?
Yeah.
Or should I just send some around?
Yeah.
Okay.
What, is there any date?
We also talked about having this facilitated by Julia in June, but I'd like to start talking about it prior to that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go way earlier.
Do we have an executive session, a quick one coming up? We can do it an hour after that or before that?
Every time we think it's quick, it's.
I know.
Yeah, I don't think we have any quick executive sessions right now
That's true.
with the topics we're
Is there a
dealing with.
day or time that's preferable, generally?
Guys
Saturday.
like Tucker show up and then we're in the weeds.
What was that?
I said Saturday.
Besides that?
I know a couple weeks ahead. That'll be fine. Right, after school break, so late March.
Yeah.
Is that fine? Is everybody taking their trips and?
Just send out a handful of
Okay.
dates and see if we can set aside like 2 hours on a random day.
Okay.
Fair enough. Committee reports? Quickly.
I was just going to kind of talk about the erosion event that happened on Saturday, but we kind of discussed that a lot with the sand discussion, but NCTV 18 did record it, so I would just recommend going back and watching it. There was some really good discussion of what the WPI project did and what they covered. Linda Loring Nature Foundation and the Conservation Foundation talked, and then Vince also talked, and Jeff Carlson, as well as some homeowners. So it was a really good overview of what's going on, past, future, present, all of that. So it was really helpful. And then one thing I forgot to bring up during the NERDA discussion that Matt just reminded me was I sent around an article from the Cape Cod Times today that they just launched an app that is like an Uber, but it's their regional tourism. Regional transportation. And so their buses or minivans pick up people along the route. So they have their set route, but if you request it, on a side road, they'll take that detour, pick you up, and then bring you to your location. And you can pay through the app, so you're not putting money into a cash box. And they're starting it now on the Cape, and it's going to expand throughout the whole Cape and even be running in the summer. And I think that's something that Matt talks about a lot. I thought it was really interesting to see it put into place and something we should follow.
Yeah, I think that's why I suggested her talk about it, because she sent us all a link, and it's. I think it would be really popular in our shoulders or off season to have a route that had an algorithm and could kind of pick people up and drop them off a little closer to home. People might use it more. So I think they're using small enough buses that 2 or 3 of these little buses driving around. I think it'll be interesting to see how it works for them.
Did that go to Paula? That link?
I think we should, yeah.
I think for that article also said it took a year in planning developing this app, and it's the first RTA in Massachusetts to do it. So nice job on their part. So we'll see how it works. Get some feedback from them.
Coastal Resiliency met today, and we're meeting again a week from yesterday. The RFP is finalized and should be going out, which is great. We're still sort of discussing how do we do outreach and how do we get some out in front of some of the issues, sort of like the sand and other issues that are happening, because it's going to be a couple of years. And so we're sort of saying, how in the meantime do homeowners and various neighborhoods and things start to understand what's actually happening? People have no idea sort of what's happening. So we haven't got there yet. We changed it, but in the RFP went out, and I'm just sort of old and didn't pay attention. One of the things that kind of got a chuckle is we were calling the landfill, formerly the dump, we were calling it the Waste Options Town Environmental Park. And I'm like, what is an environmental park? Are we going to be selling tickets, and are kids going to go and sort waste on a rainy day? And so we did change it to the landfill so people understood. I thought that was kind of funny. I always talk about the psychology of previous investment, where you don't want to spend money because you're going to spend it because, I already spent it. And I learned, today it's called sunk cost fallacy. That was another thing. I thought, okay, that's even better. And then the only other comment is at some point I think we should put on the agenda and make a quick motion to figure out how to do a sandbank and sell individually. And I would just want to make sure we capture that and have that discussion soon. We may not happen for 2 years or a year and a half or 3 years or whatever, but I think it would be great to sort of get those answers now when it's fresh, put it in place, and that would be sort of a really good step. So I just wanted to ask that to be on the future agenda soon so we can capture it.
One idea, I didn't want to bring it up when Paula was here, because with her battle with Brian on figuring out fiscal this, fiscal that. I think this seniors ride for free on Wednesdays in February is a good thing. It's not bad, but I think it should be seniors ride for free all winter, because I don't think just being at my coffee shop across, I don't see a lot of seniors riding. So the buses are already going. It's not going to cost anything. Buses are already rolling. I really think seniors should ride free all winter long. I didn't want to say that because I don't want her to break her other foot or just hear me say that. But I just think seniors ride for free in February on Wednesdays. It just doesn't feel right. I just think it should be for January through March or November through.
I think all the other days they get half price, right? In the winter.
All off season.
Yeah, but there is that provision in there.
And then the other thing, we had the chamber did a HR kind of hiring retention panel last night. I was lucky to be on it, but Amanda Perry was on it, our HR director, and she did a fabulous job explaining how the challenges of hiring for the town. And so I learned a little bit, and I think everybody in maybe 20, 25 people who were there really kind of got to understand how the town works from a hiring process. and also kind of thinking like, it's not a bad job, and working with the town and all the different departments. So I just wanted to give her a shout out that she did a great job. And I ran into her today and said, you should do that more when there's opportunities to talk about the town and human resources and how they hire and all the benefits of working with the town.
My sister attended, and she said the same thing separately. Just said, who's that Amanda? And he said, oh, that explained. She goes, yeah, she was really good.
Yep.
So.
Great, good to hear. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I just have one quick comment, sorry. Your question about how to get more people involved with the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee also came up Saturday at the erosion discussion, and I think the timing of like 11 to 1 is really difficult for people who are working to get involved. So I don't know if you guys want to look at the timing of your meetings to get more attendance.
Right. We actually, surprisingly, we get 5 or 6, 7 diehard people almost in the public every time. It's one of the, and I understand the problem with it, but there are some diehards that are there. So
Down the road, can we tape it when we figure out things that we can tape and not tape? And just a thought.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's worth
we
it.
have money for that. It's there.
Yeah, I mean, we aren't at any. It will be worth it when we get more meaningful discussion, and I think people will show up when it starts to impact them, and we're starting to talk about how do we do it. Right now, it's in the future, and it's so. And I think they were planning also a fair amount of outreach. One of the things that we discussed today, we didn't decide on, but I thought maybe under select board comment or planning board comment or Concom comment, there could be 5 minutes and we could show, sort of one picture in one scenario. Here's the storm pathways, and that's it. That's all we show that night. Another night, here's different levels of sea level rise. Here's what they look like on Nantucket. Here's where they'll impact us. And just start to get people to realize that these are how it's going to impact different areas. Right now, we don't really think about it. So, but we haven't decided, and that would have to be sort of laid out with 10 or 11 of those to do over the course of a year.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
They're going to bring accordion